Joining
Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Can everyone please turn on their videos?
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Mataji, I'm driving. Can you please excuse me for not turning on the video?
Okay, but try not to drive during class.
Yes,
If at all
Mataji.
possible.
Yes, Mataji, yes.
Okay, do we have somebody here who's going to introduce me for anybody who might not know me?
Yes, Mataji.
Rukmini Hadisevani, is that you who's going to introduce me?
Mataji, just 1 minute. I think this Vrinda Prabhu might join us.
We should wait for Russell?
Yes, yes, Mataji.
Okay. How have your studies been going so far?
Good, Mataji.
You've had Vamsi Vadan Prabhu?
Yes, Mataji.
Is he the only teacher or is someone else also?
Only he was teacher.
He did chapters 1 to 3. Okay, nice.
Yes,
He was one of my teachers also when I did Bhakti Vaibhava. He's very good. Just going to get on Rasala Prabhu's case. Would someone like to sing while we're waiting? Jai Radha Madhava?
Mataji, do you want us to sing Jai Radha Mother?
Yeah, would one of you like to sing Jai Radha Madhava while we wait for Rasala Prabhu?
Yes, he's. Yes. Can I volunteer, Mataji?
Oh, he's just joining now.
Yes.
I just hate singing over Zoom, so I always get someone else to do it.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. So we welcome today Her Grace Prabhupada Priya Mataji today with us. So we have a great fortune, and she's a very special devotee, very learned. And I'll read up to you some of the. And I had a fortune also being with her in Bhaktivedanta Module 1. The first thing is we have the first teacher now who has done the Bhaktivedanta, very qualified, very learned in Shastra. And Prabhupada Priya Mataji joined full-time devotee in ISKCON as in 1992. She was born in USA. She completed her university education with a BA in human ecology in 1991. And she first met devotee in Malaysia while on a international tour or research project. And later she joined as a brahmacharini in Brahmacharini Ashram in London, Soho Street Temple. And there she was initiated in 1993. And after several years of distributing books, leading women's Sankirtan parties in UK, she transitioned to Grasa Ashram, moved to India, spending 10 years in Vrindavan and 9 years in Mayapur, raising her 2 devotee daughters, teaching at Shri Mayapur International School, distributing books, writing. She's the author of 2 books, Rising Above It All, Higher Consciousness and Happier Life, an introductory book aimed at outreach preaching, and the Living Gita, soon to be published. So in 2018, she entered Vanaprastha ashram, returned to the USA, and currently she resides at ISKCON of Gales Valley in Florida, where she serves as the educational director, board member, and head of the Krishna House North America strategic planning team. She has been teaching Bhakti Shastri since 2012 and has completed her Bhakti Vaibhava Bhakti Vedanta course. She's a registered teacher of ISKCON Disciple course, a graduate of and teacher for the GBC College for Leadership Development, and a member of ISKCON North American Region Government Body. So we would like to welcome her. Thanks, Mataji, for your wonderful association to us. And we look forward to have a great learning under your guidance and your experience. Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prabhu. So it's my great honor to be with you all today to discuss a very important topic, the Srimad Bhagavatam. So let us start with, we'll do a Mangala Charanam invocation. You can mute, you're everyone muted, and you can say along on your own. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militan Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasani Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai. Thank you. It's always nice to start by begging for the blessings from all our gurus and previous acharyas and the 6 Goswamis, the Panchatattva, Srimati Radharani, and the Lord himself. So let us all be blessed, showered with blessings. We need all the help we can get in this great endeavor to access the Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay. So as an introduction to the sections that we're going to talk about today, I would like to recap the first verse of the Bhagavatam a little bit and relate it to the current context, because the first verse of the Bhagavatam, I'm sure you studied in some depth just recently, so that's good. It's all fresh in your minds. And it's really, it establishes the subject matter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So everything in the Bhagavatam, you can relate to that first verse in some way. And Jiva Goswami mentions in his Tattva Sandarbha that the first 2 cantos of the Bhagavatam give special prominence to Ashraya Tattva. You probably are aware that Ashraya means the supreme shelter. And that supreme shelter is the supreme personality of Godhead. So in Canto 2, you're going to learn about the 10 topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and Ashraya is one of them. So there in 2.10.1, Shukadeva Goswami says, Atra Sarga Visargascha, Stanam Poshanam Utaya, Manvantare Shanu Kata, Nirodho, Muktir, Ashraya. So these 10 topics. Sarga means the elemental creation. Visarga is the secondary creation performed by Brahma. Then Stanam means the planetary systems, or just the structure of the universe, how everything is situated within this universe. Poshanam means the protection and maintenance of the universe and everyone in it by the Lord. Then there's Utaya, which is the creative impetus, the inspiration to create. Then Manvantar means the change of the Manus. Isha Anukata means the science of the God, or topics related to Isha, the Lord. Nirodho is dissolution, Muktir, liberation, and then Ashraya is the supreme shelter. So the main topic, my point here is that the main topic is Ashraya. And all these other topics, the other 9 topics, all indirectly, directly or indirectly, indicate Ashraya. But still, Ashraya needs to be clearly pointed out. Because, for those who understand Krishna, who is the supreme Ashraya, then he's very obviously present, especially in the Bhagavatam and throughout all the Vedic literatures and all the, all the Shrutis and all the Smritis and Puranas and everything. The Lord is very present as a supreme person for those who are devotees. But for those who aren't devotees, who don't know the Lord, then he can be missed. One can study all the Shrutis and Smritis and Puranas and Itihasas and still not understand that the purpose of life is to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Srimad Bhagavatam begins with a very strong emphasis on Ashraya from the very first verse, which is the invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. From the very start, it's like we are talking about Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, the son of Vasudeva. And so that's the subject matter of this book. And then it goes on to say that this Vasudeva, Krishna, is Janmadyasya Yataha, that he's the cause, or he's the source of everything. He's the cause of the creation, the sustenance, and the destruction of the manifested universes. So then just in that small statement, Janmadyasya Yataha, that includes 8 topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam, because Sarga and Visarga, they're all about creation. So that's Janma. Then it's Janma Adi, so creation, sustenance. Also Utaya is the creative impetus, so that's also there with creation. And then Stanam and Poshanam are both related to the maintenance or sustenance of the universes, because Stanam is how it's all situated and how it's being maintained in that situation. And then Poshanam is who's protecting all the living beings within the universe. Then also Manvantara has to do with maintenance, because it's the Manus who, we're talking about the Manus who play a role in universal maintenance, and Manu Samhita, guiding mankind. And also the Manvantaras are the time scales within a day of Brahma, 14 Manvantaras and all that. So it's giving us a sense of structure about how this universe is maintained. And then Nirodha, how it's destroyed. So that's all Janmadyasya Yataha. And that's all done, orchestrated and overseen by who? The Ashraya, Krishna. So then what's left? There's 2 topics, Ishanukata and Mukti. So Ishanukata means the science of God. So that's directly about Isha. And then the first verse of the Bhagavatam continues. So we said, Janmadyasya Yaton Vayad Itaratas Charteshva Bhigya Swarat. So Anvayad Itaratas Charteshva Bhigya Swarat means that the Lord is the one who is directly and indirectly conscious of everything. In other words, he knows what's happening. He knows how it's happening, and he knows why it's happening. So he knows everything, and yet he is Swarat. He's totally independent. He's aloof and he's unaffected. He's self-satisfied. And then another aspect of the science of God is Tene Brahma Hrida Ya Adi Kavaye, that he's the source of all Vedic knowledge, and he gave that knowledge to Brahma and the sages. But even though he enlightened Brahma and the sages from within the heart, and invested with them so much knowledge, Muyanti Yatsuraya, just as he can give knowledge to the demigods, he can also bewilder them. And we see cases in the Bhagavatam of demigods being bewildered. And then how does he do this? How does he bewilder the demigods? Tejo vari mridam yata vini mayo yacha tri sargo mrisha. He does it by his external energies, by the three modes of material nature. And Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita 1840. He says, there's no being either here or among the demigods in the higher planets who is free from the three modes born of material nature. So this is all part of Ishanukataha, the science of God, that he has his different energies. One of those energies is Mahamaya, that bewilders everyone, including us, or especially us, into thinking that this material existence is the ultimate reality, when actually it's Amrisha. It's just a reflection. It resembles the real thing, but it's not actually the real thing. So then what is the reality? That's also right there in the first verse. Dhamna swena sada nirasta kuhakam. The reality is the spiritual world, the Lord's own transcendental Dham, which is eternal and self-sufficient, where Krishna resides along with his associates and his paraphernalia, and everything is there for his transcendental enjoyment. And it's just the opposite of this world, which is full of ignorance and suffering, and the spiritual world is full of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. So, and then another aspect of Ishanukataha, the science of God, is that Krishna is not just God. He's much more than God. He's Param Satyam. He's the absolute truth. The Prabhupada says there that if we say that Krishna is God, then that's limiting, because there are, there's God, and then there's things and people who are not God. So if we say that Krishna is only God, then there's so much else that is separate from him. But the absolute truth means that there's nothing separate from him. He's everything. He's God, and he's also those things that are not God, because those are also his energies and his expansions, and they're all his parts and parcels. So Param Satya means that so when we say that Krishna is God, that's an insult. That's like insult by insufficient glorification. He's the absolute truth. Param Satyam. And then also in the first verse, it tells us, so the last topic is mukti. So how to get free from all of this, this place of it's dukalayama shashvatam, that's full of ignorance and suffering, and how to get back to that holy Dham of the Lord. Param Satyam Dhimahi. That's the directive here, that we need to meditate on Krishna. We need to meditate on that supreme absolute truth, his name, form, abode, qualities, and pastimes. And like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, that Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mame vaishyasi satyam te pratijane priyosime. Always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, offer your homage to me, and thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. So this verse, actually, Krishna is so emphatic about this point, because he says, Eva Ashyasi. Eva means surely you will come to me. And then he says, Satyam te, I'm telling you the truth. And he says, Pratijane, I promise you. So in that short verse, just those 4 short lines of Bhagavad Gita, 3 times, he's saying, you will come to me. Surely you will come to me. I'm telling you the truth about this. I'm not lying to you. I promise you that all you need to do is just think of me and you'll come to me. Think of me with devotion. Offer your obeisances from your heart and remember me. So, and that's what the first verse of the Bhagavatam is saying. Param Satyam Dhimahi. So we need to meditate on Krishna, who is the Ashraya, who is our shelter. So this shelter, this aspect of Krishna being the shelter, is the most important of all the 10 topics of the Bhagavatam. And it's very interesting because it also relates to the most important quality of a devotee. Because as you know, there are 26 qualities of a devotee, but it's said that the main one is, does anybody know? And the hint is that it's related to
taking
Go ahead.
exclusive shelter of Krishna. I mean, exclusively dependent upon Krishna.
Yeah, good. Thank you. So Krishna Eka Sharanam, taking exclusive shelter of Krishna. So that's really what makes a person a devotee. Because the other 25 qualities, people who are not devotees can have to some extent, right? Somebody can be very truthful, they can be clean, they can be friendly, they can be humble, they can be poetic, they can be peaceful, like that. But only a devotee can be Krishna Eka Sharanam. So that's really the defining characteristic of a devotee. So in order to take shelter of Krishna, we need to know who that shelter is. We need to know who the Ashraya is, where he is, how to take shelter of him. So we really need to know the Ashraya extensively with full details, vivid descriptions, illustrations, demonstrations. And this is what the Srimad Bhagavatam is. It gives us all that information. That's the amazing thing of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, is that we have all this information about the supreme absolute truth. There's no other religious tradition in this world that gives us so much information about the Lord. And the main text for understanding the Lord is Srimad Bhagavatam, as Jiva Goswami says, that this is our main Parama Praman. This is the main evidence about who the Lord is and how to know the Lord. So, and it's said in the Bhagavatam itself, this fact that I'm pointing out to you here in Srimad Bhagavatam 2:10-2. There's this verse that says, Dashamasya Vishuddhyartam Navanam Iha Lakshanam Varnayanti Mahatmana Shrutenartena Chanjasa. So Artam Navanam Iha. Artam means the purpose. And then Navanam means 9, the 9 other topics, Iha in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the purpose of these 9 other topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam is what? Dashamasya Vishuddhi. So Dash means 10. So he's saying that the purpose of these Navanam, the 9 topics, other 9 topics, is to elucidate the 10th topic, which is Ashraya. That's what Vishuddhi means. We know Shuddhi is like Shuddha. It means pure, to be purity, holiness, virtuousness. But it also, Vishuddhi can also mean isolation or to exclude something. That's how Prabhupada translates it. He translates this verse: to isolate the transcendence of the summum bonum, the symptoms of the rest are described by Vedic inference. Yeah, so to isolate the transcendence of the summum bonum. So isolate in the sense as usually isolate is kind of like a negative word, like we don't want to isolate people. But if you think of it in terms of like chemistry, you want to isolate a substance from a solution of mixed substances. So it's like isolate in the sense that you want to extract the essence. Like when you extract from a plant, you extract the essential oil that can be used very powerfully medicinally for different purposes. Or let's say there's a crowd of people, and you pull one very important person out of that crowd of just ordinary people, and you put that person on the stage in the limelight, so everybody can see them and appreciate them. So that's what the other nine topics are meant for, is to draw everyone's attention to the ashraya. And you can say also that the 9 cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam are also for that purpose, to lead us up to and prepare us mentally, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually for the 10th canto, so that we can really appreciate Krishna therein as the ashraya. And the same verse 2:10 also says how the other 9 topics accomplish this, setting the ashraya apart from the rest, is Varnayanti Mahatmana Shrutenartha Chanjasa, that they do it sometimes by Shrutena, by Vedic inference, by Artena, by direct explanation, or by Anjasa, by summary explanations by the great sages. So we see this all throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, that there are references to different Vedas. There are places where the philosophy is given directly, the philosophical portions of the Bhagavatam. And then there are some where there are stories about, historical happenings. And some are where sages are just giving some summaries, explaining things in a summary fashion. Okay, so why am I starting with all of this? Because chapters 4 and 5, which is the chapters that I'm going to be covering this weekend and next weekend, are talking about how Vyasadeva, it wasn't until Vyasadeva really understood the need for all this that he was inspired to give us the Srimad Bhagavatam. That we're going to see how, despite all of his spiritual and literary accomplishments, he was still depressed in his life. And also because Shonaka Rishi and the sages at Naimisharanya, they were already aware of the special feature of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that Srimad Bhagavatam is something very different from all the other Vedic literatures, because it points out this exceptionally important subject matter, the ashraya, the samambonam, the supreme personality of Godhead. It's in that way, it's unique amongst all the other Vedic Shrutis and Smritis, because it's the only one that highlights the name, form, qualities, pastimes of the supreme person. So the sages are very eager to hear it, and they congratulate Sutta Goswami in order to encourage him to speak it at length. So that's where we're going to start now, is that the sages, they're assembled there, and Sutta Goswami is sitting on the seat of honor, and they really want him to speak the Bhagavatam at length. So they're going to try to encourage him. So we'll start from chapter 4, text 1. This chapter is called The Appearance of Sri Narada. Narada doesn't appear till the very end, so I have to keep you in suspense about that. Vyasa vacha iti bruvanam samstuya muninam dirgha satrinam ridha kulapati sutam bhavricha shonako bravit. Translation: on hearing Sutta Goswami speak thus, Shonaka Muni, who was the elderly, learned leader of all the rishis, engaged in that prolonged sacrificial ceremony, congratulated Sutta Goswami by addressing him as follows. So, yeah, he's congratulating Sutta Goswami because he's trying to encourage him. He feels a need to encourage him to speak, because he wants him not just to speak, not just to say a few words, but he wants him to speak for a long time. He wants him to really elaborate, to speak with depth. And he wants him to feel inspired to really open his heart and share his personal realizations. So what are some ways that, I'm asking you now, what are some ways that we can encourage a senior devotee to speak in this way? You know, because sometimes you might have a question that you want a really nice answer for. And you approach a senior devotee, you ask them the question, and you don't want them to just give you some off-the-cuff answer, you know, just some one-sentence answer and go away. You want them to sit down with you and really go deeply into it and, you know, share their realizations on the topic and try to make it relevant to your life and speak very compassionately, right? That's the kind of answers that we all want. So what can we do to encourage senior devotees to answer our questions in this way, in this kind of way?
By appreciating them, by appreciating their knowledge, which they have acquired over the years, and by being humble in their lotus feet and asking them for the knowledge which they have acquired and requesting them to share that with us.
Okay, that's good. Sounds like, yeah, very good approach.
By being inquisitive, showing them that we are very much interested and asking them for that.
Okay, so very sincere inquiries, like I really want to know. And then the other part that Rasa Raman Krishna said is, and you can tell me because you have so much knowledge, so much experience, you're so mature in Krishna consciousness, so realized, and you can definitely answer this. Okay, anything else?
That if I show my eagerness to learn, and if I be humble, asking my queries,
Being humble and?
if I show my interest that I really want to learn.
A willingness to learn. So yeah, that you're really open to learning. You're there opening your heart to accept their answer. Okay, good. And how do we show that we really want to learn?
By making an effort to learn in the first place.
Like, for example, what kind of effort?
Putting in the work, doing some background self-study before we go and ask them.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, so you approach them saying, I have this question, and I read this in this section of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, in which it was being explained like this. And, you know, so that helped me get a perspective on it, but I'm still not sure. Can you clarify? Right. So it shows that you've tried, you've made an effort to understand through, you know, through Shastra. Maybe you've asked the question to other devotees and you're coming with some ideas already. Yeah, that's nice. What else?
Mataji, by following the famous verse of Bhagavad Gita, Tad Vidhi Pranipatena Hari Prashnena Sevaya.
Okay. Would you like to tell us what that means?
We should ask the senior devotees or the learned scholars very humbly. We should not be quite arrogant, or we should not challenge them like that.
Okay, so asking submissive inquiries. And also there's another part of that. You talked about pariprashnena. There's also
Sevaya.
Sevaya. Yeah, that's serving that person. Because if you serve a senior devotee, then you know, that kind of it's like the 6 loving exchanges between a devotee, that offering gifts in charity, accepting charitable gifts, revealing one's mind, confidence, inquiring confidentially, accepting prasad, offering prasadam. Those are the ways to develop a loving relationship. So let's say if you've done some service for them, if you've offered them prasadam, if you've given them some gift, a donation, or any gift, then they're going to be more favorably inclined towards you, because that's naturally how love awakens. So if there's some relationship of love between you and that senior devotee, then it's more likely that they're going to sit down with you and take the time to give you a nice answer. So that also helps. Yeah. And then one thing that I was trying to get to, but hasn't come up. Oh, Gita Krishna Prabhu, would you like to tell us?
I can't think of everyone.
There's a, let's see, there's a clue in the last verse of chapter 3. That's the clue I'm going to give you. You can just look back at that and find it.
Mataji, hearing attentively.
Yes. He says, I heard from him with rapt attention. So that's a way to show that you were saying that we should show a willingness to learn and all that. So one way to show a willingness to learn is that when the person's answering the question, to listen very attentively, like be on the edge of your seat, looking at the speaker and taking notes and being fully absorbed in what they're saying. Because nowadays it's so hard for people to be attentive. There's so many distractions. We all have our little devices there that are always peeping away at us and flashing. And it's like you try to talk to somebody and they're always looking at this device. So it's a symptom of Kali Yuga, that we just have such short attention spans and they're getting shorter every day. So we really need to make an endeavor and mold our lives in such a way that we can be attentive. Like when it's time for class, make that a sacred time. Don't think I'm going to do this during class, like during class, it's a Zoom class. I'll just, looks like I'm looking at my screen, but I'm actually checking my email or checking my WhatsApp or, whatever you might be doing on your computer that nobody notices. And it looks like you're being very attentive, staring at your computer screen and your mind's totally somewhere else. So, yeah, that's not encouraging to the speaker. Usually the speaker can figure out when you're doing that. And especially on Zoom, like if your video is off, unless you have a really good excuse for it that you've told me about, then I'm usually going to assume that you're not there or doing something else. And that's why you don't want to have the video on, is because you don't want me to see that you're like cooking or doing yoga exercises or something like that in the background. Yeah. So, and another thing is, in terms of class, it's encouraging for me as a speaker, if you can all be here on time. I think everybody was really good today. I got the link a little bit late, so maybe I was a little late, but yeah, being on time shows that you're eager to learn and you don't want to miss anything. You want to hear it from the beginning. And yeah, so all these things, that there's some glorification of the speaker, respectful, submissive attitude, and everyone's there on time, listening attentively, and also asking questions. Whenever you ask questions, that shows that you're taking it seriously. It shows that you've heard attentively, that you're thinking about it, you're really trying to understand, you're processing it, you're thinking about how this applies to you, how it relates to other things that you've studied. So that's another thing that's very encouraging to the speaker. And we see that throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? All these questions. That's why we have the Srimad Bhagavatam, is because the sages of Naimisharanya asked all these questions. And Maharaj Parikshit asked so many questions. If it wasn't for those questions, we wouldn't have the Bhagavatam. And so this questioning and answering is a very important Vedic tradition. And so we need to continue it. And the more we continue with questions and answers on the topics of the Bhagavatam, specifically in relation to Ashraya and the devotees who are Apashraya, those who have taken shelter of the supreme shelter, then the knowledge of the absolute truth expands. It goes on expanding. That the Bhagavatam, it starts off like a stream, only 4 verses that the Lord spoke to Brahma, those 4 seed verses from Canto 2, chapter 9. It's 33 to 36, the 4 seed verses of the Bhagavatam. That's what it started with. And then from that, then Brahma instructed Narada, and then Narada instructed Vyas, and then Vyas instructed Shukadev, and then Shukadev instructed Parikshit, and then Sutta Goswami happened to be there hearing all that, and then Shonaka, then Sutta instructs Shonaka and all the sages at Naimisharanya. So it just keeps expanding. It's like the Ganga, when it starts off way up in the Himalayas at Gangotri, it starts off as just a small stream. And then as it goes down, so many tributaries are coming into it. And so it's expanding and expanding and expanding. And by the time it gets to Ganga Sagar, when it flows into the Bay of Bengal, it's this huge, wide, expansive delta, you know, that you can barely see the other side of the Ganga. So it's so wide. So like that, the Vedic knowledge goes on expanding. And as time goes by, as the disciplic succession continues, then it expands more and more. So you see that Srila Prabhupada expanded the Bhagavatam so much through his purports. Right? If we would just take if we just had the translations to the Bhagavatam, it would be, you know, maybe just a few books. But with Srila Prabhupada's purports, it's something that fills your whole bookshelf, right? And then if we take all the commentaries and books that followers of Srila Prabhupada have written based on Prabhupada's purports, then it expands even more. And if we take all the classes, all of the Bhakti Vaibhava classes that have ever been given, all the Bhagavatam classes that have been given by all the devotees in the history of ISKCON, then it expands so much more, and it will continue to expand. Because whenever a devotee speaks on Bhagavatam, they add to it their own personal realizations. And so it just becomes richer and richer as time goes by. So we're very fortunate. And yeah, the more we encourage the speakers of Bhagavatam in all these ways, then the more benefit we're going to get from hearing it. Okay, so this is very important. And also, Srila Prabhupada points out that the person who glorifies the speaker should be the leader of the house. That's how he puts it, the leader, and also should be an elderly person and vastly learned. So why is it that the person who glorifies the speaker should be the head person in the assembly? Is because you know, like if somebody who's just a junior person glorifies someone, it's you know, maybe they don't know, they're not experienced, they don't appreciate the difference between a senior devotee and a junior devotee, and who actually knows and who doesn't know. But someone who has actually experienced, an actually advanced devotee glorifies another devotee, then that means something. You know, it's just like if there's somebody who's like a master chef, they're like a connoisseur of food, and they eat something and they say, wow, this is delicious. That's means a lot more than somebody who just eats all kinds of things, eats tons of junk food, and they eat it and say, oh, this is really good. You know, it's like, you know, what do you know about food? You eat, you know, whatever, fast food and everything, and you think that's good too, you know, but somebody who really knows, you know, good food, if they praise the food, then it's good. So that's more of a glorification if it comes from somebody who actually understands the standard of quality. So yeah, so this is all important. And in the purport to this verse, Srila Prabhupada also refers to what Sutta Goswami said in the last verse of chapter 3, that he feels himself very fortunate to have heard directly from Shukadev, that he heard it with rapt attention, and that by his mercy he learned it. And this is also important because sometimes we think, yeah, by my intelligence, I'm just going to understand everything. But actually, it's when we're hearing or trying to learn and understand transcendental subject matters, we can't do so just by our material intelligence. It also requires mercy, because Krishna is called Adokshaja, which means one who cannot be accessed by the material senses, nor by the material mind or material intelligence. So Bhagavatam is non different from Krishna. And if we're really going to understand it, then we can't do so through our material mind or intellect. We need to get the mercy of the Lord himself, which comes through the mercy of the devotees. So that's also another reason why it's important to please the devotee whom we're hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from. And that's why it's really essential to offer respect to all of our teachers. So, yeah. Okay, I think we've covered this. All right, and then Srila Prabhupada says, all right, so the importance of hearing with rapt attention. And then in the purport here, Prabhupada says something very important about how do we hear with rapt attention? How do we come to this? How are we able to hear with rapt attention? What does he say? It's towards the end of the purport.
A person who is no one can give rapt attention who is not pure in mind. One who is not pure in mind, pure in action cannot be pure in mind. One who is not pure in eating, sleeping, fearing, and meeting cannot pure in action.
Okay, good. Yeah, this is a very important point. I'm sure you discussed this in your last class. So also we need to be pure ourselves, pure activities, strictly following the regulative principles, chanting 16 rounds, trying to serve Krishna, and just keeping ourselves pure in body, mind, and intelligence. And that way we can be attentive and we can benefit from hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then the result of that is that we'll be able to see Krishna in person in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam. So far we've been talking about the qualifications of those who are hearing Bhagavatam, and it's also mentioned the qualifications of a person who speaks the Srimad Bhagavatam. So what are some of those? What are some of the qualifications of the speaker? There's quite a few given in this purport to text 1.
You should be a bona fide speaker. That means coming down in the line of disciplic succession.
Yes, okay, good. What else?
He or she must be learned in the Shastric knowledge.
Okay, they have to know what they're talking about. Yes. And?
He must repeat the words of the acharyas.
Okay, repeating that with full confidence in the previous acharyas, especially like not thinking that they know better than the acharya, but they're just representing.
Explained as well read. Akhyatani adhitani. We
What's
read
that?
it in last classes. Explained as well read. Akhyatani and adhitani. We studied this in last lectures.
Okay,
Qualification of.
Right, okay, well read. Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Must realize the subject matter.
He must be a good disciple.
A good disciple. Okay, yes.
And servant.
Must realize the subject matter.
Should have realized this subject matter. Yeah. So this raises an interesting question because we're hearing also that the speaker has to speak it as it is, as they've heard it, not, as Prabhupada would say, not screwing out some meaning. So then if we're just, and sometimes he gives this analogy of the postman, that the postman just delivers the letter, right? Doesn't add anything, doesn't subtract anything, doesn't change anything, just gives the letter. So what is the scope for our own realization? How does that work? What is it? What is the permissible range for adding our realization to the subject matter? What's that, Prabhu? Sorry, Gita Krishna Prabhu, you were saying something? You're muted, Prabhu.
It was a mistake, I think.
Oh,
Hare
okay.
Krishna. Mataji, those realizations should be relevant to this time. I mean, in which era he's telling. I mean, it should be like it. In first verse, it is mentioned that he can present the metaphor to particular circumstances in a particular in a suitable manner.
Okay, great. Yeah. So our realization is in how what we're reading from these ancient texts applies to our lives in the here and now, because the world is a lot different now than it was 5,000 years ago, and the application is also somewhat different. So we need to make it relevant and applicable. Okay. Yeah, and also part of that is to make it interesting and understandable for the audience. Because, if we just, read the purport, or if we just, present things philosophically, then we might not be able to capture the interest of the audience. So, but if we make it relatable to their lives, to current situations that are going on, then that becomes more interesting for them. It's more suitable for their understanding. Okay. And also just, of course, presenting it in our own words. I've had many students say that, and I also personally experienced that, when you're in a Bhagavatam class, the person reads the verse, they read the purport, and then you're trying to pay attention, but it's actually it's difficult to pay attention when someone's just reading. And then as soon as they finish the purport and start speaking, then it's like, okay, now it's time to connect. Now you feel, now I'm going to understand something, isn't it? Yeah. So it's so much easier when the person's actually saying the thing, is presenting it in their own words. And, because it becomes more personal, and that's how we assimilate, is through personal interaction. That's how we're wired to learn, is through personal experiences and communications. And that's how the Bhagavatam was given, right? It was always spoken. It's a spoken text. So it needs to be spoken. And the more we can relate it also to our own life experiences and our own observations of the world and its current condition, then the more understandable it becomes. So that's where realization comes in. And our realization is very important. But realization can only be there when we've deeply studied it and thought deeply about it. Because it's, you can read and it can just go in one ear and out the other. Or I guess you're not hearing. If you're reading it, you just sort of read it and you're like, okay, I did my reading for the day, done. But it's important that after reading or while reading, you sort of take a pause and just sit back and think about what you've read. And I do that a lot, and it's very helpful. I'll read a verse and I'll read a purport, and I'll just kind of I'll just sit there and reflect on it, and just sort of let all the thoughts and ideas and applications go through my head. And it becomes very exciting that way, because you can feel that Krishna is there in your heart, and he's giving you all these insights through the verse. So that's very helpful. The process is Shravanam, Kirtanam, Mananam. So in terms of study, I've heard like that. Sachinandan Swami speaks like that we hear, we speak, and Mananam means you think about it deeply with your mind. You engage your mind in it. Okay, we should go on. We spent a long time on the first verse, but this is very important. Okay, text 2. Shonaka vacha sutta mahabhaga vadano vadatam vada katam bhagavatim punyam yad aha bhagavan chukaha. Shonaka said, O Sutta Goswami, you are the most fortunate and respected of all those who can speak and recite. Please relate the pious message of Srimad Bhagavatam, which was spoken by the great and powerful sage Shukadeva Goswami. So here, Shonaka is doing exactly what you all were saying that he should do to encourage the speaker. is to, glorify him and give him confidence, encourage him that you know the Bhagavatam. You've heard the Bhagavatam already. You're that's what makes you most fortunate. And also you're such an excellent speaker. Vadatam Vara, you're the best of speakers. And you've heard and surely you can speak the Bhagavatam well, because you've heard it rightly, you've heard it properly, you've heard it from a bona fide source, from Bhagavan Shukaha, from Shukadev Goswami, who is greatly powerful, so much so that he's calling him Bhagavan. And so you learned in chapter 2 that there's the book Bhagavat and the devotee Bhagavat. That the devotee Bhagavat is the one who lives their life in terms of the book Bhagavat. And then the book Bhagavat is also full of information of the original Bhagavat, Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the person Bhagavat, the pure devotees. So the two are interconnected. And here also we have both, because Sutta Goswami has heard Bhagavat, he's heard, what's it say here? Bhagavatim Punya, he's heard the pious message of Bhagavatam so he's heard the book Bhagavat from Bhagavan Shukaha. He's heard the book Bhagavat from the person Bhagavat. So he's really in a good position to speak the Bhagavatam. And and also he's practically like a walking Bhagavatam himself. So and this is what he's going to give us. He's going to give us the pure Srimad Bhagavatam along with his realizations. So this is very exciting. You can imagine that the sages there at Naimisharanya are really like, wow, we're going to hear this message of Bhagavatam from this person who's heard it from Shukadev Goswami, who's such a pure person. And, it's like we're getting the purest thing from the purest source, and it's going to be pure nectar. So there's a lot of anticipation in the sages of Naimisharanya about what they're going to hear. You can almost when you read the Bhagavatam, you have to try to feel it. Don't just try to understand it philosophically, but try to feel the mood of what's going on with the speakers and with the hearers and in the past times, because there's a lot of emotion. Srimad Bhagavatam is full of emotion, and bhakti is all about emotion. So if we can begin to feel the emotion of the devotees towards the Lord and the emotion of the devotees towards the other devotees who are speaking the Bhagavatam, which is about the Lord, then our own emotions can start to connect with their emotions, and through that we can awaken our dormant, transcendental, pure spiritual sentiments towards the Lord. So really try to do this as you go through your Bhakti Vaibhava studies and Bhakti Vedanta studies. Try to really think deeply about the personalities and what they're feeling. And we can look into what they're saying, what they're thinking, and what is that coming from? Because there's always an emotional root that's coming from. So try to really get into that a little deeper. Okay. All right. So then let's go forward. So, all right. So the first thing that Shonika is going to ask here is about the history of the Srimad Bhagavatam, because he's aware of the unique nature of the Bhagavatam, that this is the final work of Vyasadeva. And usually if there's an author and they write many books, it's like the final book is like the epic, it's like the quintessential achievement that contains all the realizations from a whole lifetime. And we heard about that in I think it's the second verse that talks about how Vyasadeva wrote the Bhagavatam in his maturity, after he'd lived a whole life in devotional service, after he compiled all the Vedas. Now he wrote the Bhagavatam. So we're going to hear more about that. So let's read text 3. Would someone like to read the Sanskrit and English for that, please?
Kasmin yuge pravrittiyam sthane vakena hetuna kutah sanchoditah Krishnaha kritavan samhitam munihi. Translation. In what period and at what place was this first begun? And why was this taken up? From where did Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, the great sage, get the inspiration to compile this literature? Hare
Okay.
Krishna.
Thank you. So he wants to know how the Srimad Bhagavatam came out. And particularly, he's asking, what was Vyasadev's inspiration? So when someone does something amazing, something uncommon, unprecedented, we often want to ask them, what was your inspiration? What inspired you to do this? What inspired you to start this initiative? So why is it interesting to know what inspired someone? I'm sure you've asked someone this question before. What inspired you, Prabhu, to do that? So why do we want to know that?
So that we could be also able to do something unique and amazing in the future.
Okay, yeah, that if we know what inspired that person, we might also be similarly inspired, right? Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts?
Then you can appreciate better.
Okay, yeah, you can appreciate the intention behind the thing, right? Like, yeah, good. Anything else?
It helps us to increase our enthusiasm for that work when we hear someone's inspirations.
Yeah, it becomes, yeah, because it becomes more personal, right? It's something that you understand how it's not just something that they did, but you understand how it actually came from their heart. You know, how the idea was born from their heart, from some intention to serve the Lord, to please the devotees, to spread Krishna consciousness, to, you know, reach out to more people or something like that. And also, I think another aspect of why we really want to know what inspired people is because inspiration comes from Krishna. And Krishna is all attractive, right? This is one of the 10 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam is Utaya, the creative impetus. So creative impetus is literally, that's what inspiration is. It's our inspiration is our creative impetus. So, yeah, and we're going to see how Vyasadeva, his despondency that he was feeling, that was inspired by Krishna. And then when Narada Muni comes, Narada's visiting him and guiding him in a particular way was also inspired by Krishna. So it's commonly, this is how Krishna works, that he directs us, he directs us in our spiritual lives by giving us inspirations, inspiring us in certain ways, inspiring other people around us to speak to us and treat us in certain ways. And, you know, so by knowing the inspiration behind things, we can more clearly see Krishna's hand in what's going on. And we can, and by looking at our own inspirations, we can also, you know, see how Krishna is directing our lives, how he's prompting us in certain ways in his service. So it's all a part of introspection, personal introspection, and getting other people to introspect and connect it more back to Krishna, because everything is going to be rooted in Krishna. If you just keep asking deeper and deeper questions, everything's going back to Krishna. Because he's the source of everything. Janmadyasya yata, right? He's the source of everything. Okay. Should we take a break? Do you usually take a break? Because these classes can be kind of long, right? Are you having typically 3-hour classes?
Yes, Mataji.
Okay, I'm thinking that, well, I'm thinking that we could take a break here. How does that sound?
Yes, ma'am.
10 minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
see, time, 10 minutes now, whatever it is for you, right? For me, it's 7:36 in the morning. So anyways, 10 minutes from your clocks. See you back here. All right.
Hey, Papa. What's up?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Right, welcome back. I hope you all got to stand up and stretch your legs a little bit, drink some water or whatever you had to do. That was good because I had to chant my morning Gayatri. Okay, so we are picking up now on text 4. In text 4 to 8, Shonika Rishi starts speaking a little bit about Shukadev Goswami and asks questions related to Shukadev Goswami. So someone please read the Sanskrit and English for text 4.
Tasya putro mahayogi samadrin nirvikalpakaha ekanta matir unnitro gudho mudha iveyate. Translation. His, Vyasdev's son, was a great devotee, an equibalanced monist, whose mind was always concentrated in monism. He was transcendental to mundane activities, but being unexposed, he appeared like an ignorant person.
Thank you, Jai. Yeah, so here we have some of the glories of Shukadev Goswami. So from this, we can understand that Shonika and the sages of Naimisharanya, they knew about Shukadev Goswami, they knew something about him. So he was a familiar personality. And so they're saying some things here. They're saying that Mahayogi, he's a great devotee. Samadrik, that he has equal vision. Nirvikalpakaha. See how Prabhupada translates this. Nirvikalpakaha. Absolute. Yeah, so this is the one that Srila Prabhupada, absolute monist. Makes him sound like an impersonalist, right? Like a Advaitavadi. But actually, Vikalpa means variety. And near means without. So near Vikalpa, literal Sanskrit meaning of it is without variety. It means that he didn't see the varieties of the things in this material world. In other words, he didn't make distinctions according to material factors, like gender, race, age, social position. In other words, he was on the transcendental platform. He had transcendental vision. So, and also similarly, this ekanta mati, fixed in monism or oneness of mind. So the kind of oneness that is being talked about here, Prabhupada hints at it here when he says monism or oneness of mind. So this is more the description. The accurate description of Shukadeva Goswami's consciousness was more a sense of oneness in mind rather than being a monist in terms of, impersonalism, like the kind of monism that we want to give up. So, sometimes devotees say, yeah, Shukadeva Goswami was an impersonalist, but it's not really the correct understanding. So ekanta matir means that because he was near Vikalpa, because he didn't see, he was an Uttama Adhikari. Uttama Adhikari doesn't discriminate. The Madhyama Adhikari sees, here are people who are devotees, here are people who are just innocent, ignorant but innocent, and then here are other people who are ignorant and envious. So, they'll just discriminate. Here are, if it's a man, he'll say, oh, this is a woman, I should keep a distance because, butter and fire and all that, like that. So, or here's just they don't discriminate. Sorry, the Madhyams discriminate, but Uttama Adhikaris don't discriminate. So it's that Shukadeva Goswami was on this Uttama platform where he just didn't discriminate at all. He practically didn't even notice the external differences based on any material considerations. And instead of that, his mind was fixed on the spiritual oneness of everything. So that's ekanta matir, literally means his mind was fixed in the oneness, the spiritual oneness of everything, that everything is Krishna's energy. Everything's working under Krishna's direction. And because we were talking about how Krishna is the absolute truth. So absolute truth means that everything is ultimately Krishna. There's no duality. There's no good or bad. There's no happiness and distress. There's no such thing as success or failure. It's all just good because it's all different aspects of the all good absolute truth, Krishna. And this vision of oneness is Krishna talks about in the Bhagavad Gita 18:20, where he says, he says, Sarva Bhuteshu Yen Aikam. The same thing as Aikam, the oneness. So I'll just read the translation. That knowledge by which one undivided spiritual nature is seen in all living entities, though they are divided into innumerable forms, you should understand to be in the mode of goodness. So this is just the mode of goodness, not even the transcendental platform. Mode of goodness is that we see the undivided spiritual nature in all living entities. And then we can contrast that to understanding or perception in the mode of passion. Krishna says that knowledge by which one sees that in every different body, there is a different type of living entity. You should understand to be in the mode of passion. So Shanika is pointing out that Shukadeva Goswami, I know him to be in the mode of pure goodness, absolute goodness, Shuddha Sattva, on the transcendental platform, such that he doesn't make any distinctions between anything. He sees everything as the absolute truth. There's different varieties of the absolute truth. And so he's, near Vikalpai. He doesn't notice these varieties. And ekanta matir, because he's fixed in the oneness of everything. And Shukadeva Goswami could see things like this because he was unnidro, which literally means awake, right? You know that nidra means sleep. So unnidra means to get up from sleep. That means that Shukadeva Goswami was spiritually awakened. we hear that sleep also means ignorance. So Srila Prabhupada translates this unnidro as surpassed nescience in the word for word, and in the translation he says transcendental to mundane activities. So being awakened from sleep, being transcendental to mundane activities are like ignorant activities, or acting in a like actions in a dream that have no actual value, they have no real substance or meaning. So Shukadeva Goswami was not acting in the dream world. He wasn't in any illusion, but he was on the transcendental platform. Yeah, that's also described in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 11th canto in 11:25-20. It talks about how ignorance is compared to deep sleep. The mode of passion is compared to sleep with dreaming. The mode of goodness is like being awake. And the pure goodness, or turiyam, the fourth state of consciousness, is being fully awake and active on the transcendental platform. So that's also given there. So this correlation between getting up from sleep, unnidra, and being transcendental to the modes of material nature is established in the Bhagavatam itself. So yeah, it's like when you wake up, if you're sleeping, you can't understand what's going on around you. You have no knowledge of what's happening. You can be in a room, so many activities can be going on in that room where you're sleeping, and you have no idea, right? So, and then even when you're kind of, when you're first starting to wake up, you're still kind of like, you're still kind of like groggy, you're half asleep, half awake. So you might hear some voices, but you can't really make out what people are saying. So that's kind of like our condition now. Like we're just coming to Krishna consciousness, but we're still kind of a little bit asleep. We're not quite seeing things clearly. We're not understanding the situation perfectly. Maybe we're still attached to material things. We're still thinking that maybe I can enjoy myself through material activities and material accomplishments. And so we're still a little bit in the dream world, but we're slowly waking up. We're slowly starting to open our eyes and see the light of day and hear some voices that are a lot more real than what we were hearing in our dreams. So, but Shukadeva Goswami, he's not in this groggy, half sleep, half awakened state either. He's totally awake. He's out of bed. He took a shower. He got dressed, he's active, he's like fully awake. And in that situation, you understand everything, you see everything clearly. And so what he sees clearly is that everything is Krishna. There's only one reality, and that is the supreme absolute truth, Param Satyam. And in that sense, yeah, he's a monist. Because he understands that there's only one thing, and that is Krishna. And he's fixed in that. So yeah, like Krishna advises that we need to hear from somebody who can actually see like this. We have to, somebody who's seeing it completely, who sees the truth with no tinges of illusion, who is tattva darshinaha, right? We need to hear from someone who is tattva darshinaha. And that way we can understand the truth. Just try to learn the truth by approaching one who is tattva darshinaha, because they have seen the truth, they can explain it to us, they can describe it to us. And that's what we're getting in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Shukadeva Goswami has seen all these things that he's talking about. He's seen the pastimes of the Lord, and so he can describe them vividly. Okay, so now in the next verse, Shonaka Rishi is going to give an example of Shukadeva's equal vision. That he doesn't notice how he is near, what was the word? Near vikalpaka, that he doesn't notice material variety because he's seeing the spiritual oneness. So someone please read text 5 and the translation.
Drishtavanuyantam rishim atmajam api anagnam Devyo Riya Paridhadur Nasutasya Chitram Tadvikshya Prachati Manau Jagadustavasti Stripum Vidanatu Sutasya Vivikta Drishte. Translation. While Sri Vyasadeva was following his son, beautiful young damsels who were bathing naked covered their bodies with cloth. Although Sri Vyasadeva himself was not naked, but they had not done so when his son had passed. The sage inquired about this, and the young ladies replied that his son was purified and when looking at them, made no distinction between male and female. But the sage made such distinctions.
Okay. Yeah, so this is just an example of that Shukadev, he didn't see the variety. He saw those, the women bathing there, and he didn't even notice that they were whether they were male or female. It says here in the Sanskrit, Stri Pum Bidhana. Stri means women, Pum is like male, and then Bidha means differences, like Achintya Beda Beda Tattva. Bidha means the difference, and then Na, he didn't see it. Not and just he's looking at them, but he's not seeing any difference. He's not even noticing whether they're male or female. He's just seeing that two spirit souls are there, two jiva tattva expansions of Krishna. They're acting within the energy of Krishna. The activity that they're performing is ordained by Krishna. It's sanctioned by Krishna. It's enabled by Krishna. He's just seeing Krishna and his different various energies at work in the world. So in this way, he's ekanta matir. He's seeing only one thing. And Prabhupada explains how the ladies could understand that they could understand, by their own intuition and by his appearance, and they could understand his mood and how he was just totally oblivious to their bodily situation. So they didn't worry about him seeing them. They didn't even bother to cover themselves. They're like, this guy is totally transcendental. He's oblivious. He's obviously not affected. Because ordinarily, if a young man is walking by and sees women bathing naked, he's going to, react. He's either going to, be like, oh my God, I shouldn't be looking at that, or he's going to be looking more if he's that kind of person. But he's not going to be oblivious. Like, he's not going to be able to just pretend nothing's going on. He's going to be affected somehow, and he's going to show it through his expressions and his body language. So they saw that he was not reacting in any way whatsoever. So it's like, okay, just like, if a bird flies by, they're not going to bother. If a cow walks by, they're not going to bother, because they don't see anything to be bothered by. So in the same way, Shukadeva Goswami is in the transcendental position. And Srila Prabhupada points out in the purport that how the material body is especially designed by Maya to attract the opposite sex for the purpose of keeping us entangled in material existence. So, basically it's a trap. This material body is just like a bait to make us fall into the trap, into Maya's trap. So we have to be very careful not to go for the bait and not be just attracted to physical beauty in this world. Okay, so then what about Vyasadeva? Because it's saying that Vyasadeva made distinctions. So, we know that Vyasadeva was Shukadeva Goswami's father, and he was his teacher. So how is it that somebody who should be in a superior position seems to be acting like someone who's not so realized?
He was a grahastha, so he knew the difference between the two bodies.
Okay, yeah, that's what Prabhupada says, right? That he was playing the part of a householder. So he had to make distinctions. And he specifically says this, playing the part of. So it's not that he was actually, on the mundane platform. Vyasadeva was also completely transcendental. But it's almost like he was an Uttama Adhikari who had come down to the Madhyam platform. Prabhupada talks about that in Nectar Devotion, that sometimes an Uttama comes down to the Madhyam platform and makes distinctions, because if you don't, then you can't preach. Basically, you need to understand who the people are. You have to know your audience so that you know who is the right audience to preach to, and when you should just, like, not say anything or avoid people. So Vyasadeva, because he was playing the part of a householder, and obviously a householder needs to make distinctions because he knows he needs to, treat his wife a particular way, treat his children another way, treat other people another way. He needs to be aware if some person is going to be a menace or a threat to his family or something like that. So he needs to make distinctions in order to be a good grihasta. So like that. Yeah. And also householders are supposed to follow the social etiquette. Someone who's, a Paramahamsa, Parivrajacharya, Sannyasa, they're a little bit aloof from all these social etiquettes, but grihastas have to be very conscientious to follow the social customs. And so, yeah, he acts according to social custom, which means he probably covered his eyes and looked away. And when the ladies saw that he was following social custom, then they also reacted to him according to social custom, and they felt discomfort and they covered themselves accordingly. Okay, so this is all a glorification of Shukadeva Goswami's transcendental vision. So now Shonaka Rishi is going to ask a question in the next verse. Someone please read text 6.
Katham alikshita pore samprapta kuru jangalan ummat mukha jadvad vichran gaj save. How was he, Srila Shukdev, the son of Vyas, recognized by the citizens when he entered the city of Hastinapur, now Delhi, after wandering in the provinces of Kuru and Jangal, appearing like a madman, dumb and retarded?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we just heard in text 4 how Shukadeva was described as gudho, meaning not exposed, like it's kind of like guyam, secret or confidential. So gudho, not exposed. And also mudha eva iyati, that he appeared like an ignorant person. He was just looking like a mudha, like a foolish person. And here it says a similar thing, that let's see, unmata mukha jadavad. So unmata means mad, mukha means dumb in the sense of not being able to speak at all. And then jadavat means stunted, like Jad Bharat, right? That he didn't actually mature. He just stayed like a childlike consciousness. And so that's what he looked like. So he arrived to Hastinapur and he appeared to be someone who's just totally crazy or, mentally retarded or unable to talk at all. So he's asking, how did people recognize him? So I was thinking, why is this question being asked? Why is Shonaka asking this question? That how did they recognize it? And a little insight that I had was that because particularly it mentions Hastinapur, and Hastinapur was the capital of the Pandavas and was later the capital of Parikshit Maharaj. So Parikshit Maharaj, he was cursed to die, and he went to a secluded place to prepare for death in 7 days. And so they may have been thinking that, well, Shukadeva, the residents of Hastinapur, they want to try to help Maharaj Parikshit to achieve perfection at the end of his life and go back to Godhead. So it will be nice if somebody can go there and talk to him. Some, pure, saintly person can go there and sit by his, just like now when someone's leaving their body, senior devotees will go and sit there and chant with them, read Srimad Bhagavatam to them, pray with them, pray for them, like that. So, and we usually request that, right? We'll request senior devotees, can you please come? My mother and my father is leaving their body. Can you please come and speak to them and try to enlighten them, get them to let go of their material attachments and remind them of Krishna so they can go back to Godhead. So the insight that I got from this was that the sages are thinking that this Shukadev was wandering in Hastinapur, and somebody must have recognized him. They must have recognized that this is a great personality, and this is the right personality to send to Maharaj Parikshit to help him to, you know, to transition from this life to the spiritual world. And so someone must have directed him to the place where Maharaj Parikshit was sitting there preparing for death. So in order to direct him there, how did they recognize him? So there's kind of an assumption. There's an assumption that somebody must have told him that Maharaj Parikshit, this great devotee, is about to leave his body. Shukadev Goswami, you need to go there and talk to him. You need to go there and guide him through this transitional process. So that's why he's asking this question. But how did they recognize him? Someone must have recognized him and told him to go there. But how did they recognize him? Because he didn't appear like somebody that was capable of you know, speaking the absolute truth. He looked like just a madman, somebody who wasn't even capable of physically speaking. And even if he could, not saying anything worthwhile, because he looked just like a mudha. You know, he was not exposed. He wasn't exposing himself. He was keeping his saintly qualities and his deep philosophical knowledge hidden. Gudho. Okay. So then later, actually, we're going to get the answer to this question. The answer to this question by Shonaka comes in chapter 19 of the Bhagavatam. So I'll just give you, since we're not going to cover that for a while, I'll just fill you in on what the answer is. So the answer, it's not directly stated, but it's implied when Sutta Goswami, he describes how Shukadev was being followed. So when Shukadev was walking from Hastinapur to, I guess it's the bank of the Ganga that Parikshit was sitting, it's described how he was being followed by these women and just children, and they were just kind of like, you know, gawking at him and mocking him, and, you know, because they just thought he was a crazy person, and they were kind of teasing, making a mockery. So yeah, so what it looks like is that ordinary people, or, you know, just ordinary men, apparently didn't pay any attention to him at all, just thinking he was a dumb, useless person. And then the only one who paid attention to him were just some women and children who were just sort of following him and giving him a hard time. So then who directed him to the place where Parikshit was? It was Krishna. And if you look at Bhagavatam 1:19-36, Parikshit kind of says this himself. He says it in the form of a rhetorical question. So the verse reads, without being inspired by Krishna, how is it that you have appeared here, though you are moving incognito to the common man? You see, so he recognizes that, yeah, the way you were presenting yourself, incognito means hidden. You were hiding all of your transcendental qualities. So the answer to the question that Shonaka asks, how did they recognize him? The answer is that the citizens of Hastinapur didn't recognize him. Nobody recognized him. He was totally not recognized at all. And nobody sent him to go there. He was just inspired by Krishna. And Krishna from within his heart told him that you need to go to this place. You know, like sometimes we're you know, we're planning to do something in the day, and then something comes up and we just get a strong feeling like, no, I need to go to the temple, or I need to go visit this person, or I need to call this person. But we get an inspiration to do something. We were talking about that before, right? Inspiration. So that comes from Krishna. And we see it sometimes, like I did a lot of book distribution. You can see that sometimes somebody's walking towards you, and you're thinking, I'm going to stop that person and I'm going to try to give them a book. And they'll immediately just like cross the street, or, you know, like Paramatma tells them, you don't want to know, you want to keep your material life. You want to be happy in material life. Don't go there, you know, don't walk that way, because that person's going to give you something which is going to finish your material life. And then on the other hand, somebody who's actually seeking spiritual knowledge, I've had many people tell me something like, they get the book and they really appreciate it. And then they tell me, I never walk this way. I always come the other way to the town to do my shopping. And just today, something was telling me that I should come this way. and they'll even say, I think it was, I was inspired to come this way to meet you, to get this book, which is what I really needed. So Krishna inspires us to go places. And that way we can see how, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that, what's that verse? Maya Dyakshena Prakriti Suyate Sacharacharam Hetu Nanina Kotena Jagat Viparivartate. That Krishna says that the entire material world is working under his direction. He's directing the movements of all moving and non-moving beings. So yeah. So we're being directed from within in our movements. The condition, like people who are in total Maya, they're being directed how to continue to be in Maya. And devotees who are trying to be Krishna conscious, we're being directed how to be Krishna conscious. And Krishna is also directing other people to come into our lives to help us to be Krishna conscious, right? Like we always see how, and we're going to see soon how Narada Muni shows up on Krishna's direction. And so here we're seeing how Shukadeva Goswami showed up on Krishna's direction there for Maharaj Parikshit. And Parikshit acknowledges this also. He says in that chapter 19 that with great gratitude and actual emotion, and it's another place where we see a lot of emotion, that he says, my relatives, the Pandavas, were so dear to Krishna. So Krishna must have accepted me as one of those relatives. And he sent you here just to help me in order to please his devotees, the Pandavas. So he's like, Krishna loved my relatives, the Pandavas, so much. And even though I never met Krishna personally, but he must have accepted me as also a dear associate because of my association with the Pandavas who are so dear to him. And because he accepted me as one of those relatives, he's sent you here to take care of me at this crucial time of my leaving my body. So it's just very sweet, how Parikshit's recognizing his personal connection with Krishna through his relationship with the Pandavas, and how Krishna inspired Shukadeva to go there. So yeah, that answers this question. How was Shukadeva Goswami recognized by the citizens? He wasn't. But Krishna inspired him to go there. Okay. So now he's going to ask some further questions. Let's read, somebody can read 7 and 8. We'll discuss those together.
Katham va pandaveyasya rajareshe murnena saha samvadaha sambhutata yatresha satvati shrutihi. Translation: how did it so happen that King Parikshit met this great sage, making it possible for this great transcendental essence of the Vedas, Bhagavatam, to be sung to him? Should I read verse number 8 also?
Yes, please.
Text number 8. Sa godohan matram hi griheshu grahamedhinam avetshate mahabhagastirthi kurvarta sata dashamam. He, Shukadeva Goswami, was accustomed to stay at the door of a householder only long enough for a cow to be milked. And he did this just to sanctify the residence.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we already answered the first question. How did Parikshit meet the great sage? That Shukadeva was inspired by Krishna to go there. But now that the question is there's an additional question here, that how was it possible that Shukadeva stayed for such a long time with him? Because in order to speak the great transcendental essence of the Vedas, as it's translated here, the Bhagavatam, that must have taken a long time. It's like 18,000 verses. So that must have taken quite some time for Shukadeva to speak to Maharaj Parikshit. And yet Shukadeva, he would stay at a householder's home only long enough for a cow to be milked. And he did it just to sanctify the residents. So generally, they knew that Shukadeva Goswami had this thing that he didn't want to stay long at anyone's home. And so, yeah, how long does it take for a cow to be milked and for you to drink the milk? Or it doesn't, maybe he didn't even stay there to drink the milk. He might have just taken it and gone walking. But to milk a cow, it doesn't take, to get at least 1 cup of milk, it doesn't take long. It's just a matter of minutes, right? So how did he stay so long for hearing the Bhagavatam? And you could say in one sense that Maharaj Parikshit, he was, I mean, he had left the kingdom, but he was still kind of known as a householder and also a king, as the emperor. And we hear in Chaitanya Charitamrita how Lord Chaitanya refused to meet with Maharaj Prataparudra at all, what to speak of even for a few minutes. He didn't want to meet with him at all because he was a king. So even though Shukadeva Goswami was liberated, and we were just hearing how he doesn't discriminate, but still, he doesn't have any interest in staying with materialistic people for longer than absolutely necessary. So they're thinking, oh, Maharaj Pariksha, he's a householder, he's a king, he would have been engaged in so many, you know, he must have still had these things on his mind. So why would Shukadeva Goswami stay with him so long? He wouldn't stay with anyone for longer than a few minutes. And yeah, so especially the Bhagavatam is such an expansive literature. It must have been taken so long. So that this reminded me of a verse from the 10th canto, chapter 20, text 36, where it's talking about the rainy season in Vrindavan. And there's an analogy there that's given. It says, during the rainy season in Vrindavan, the mountains sometimes release water and sometimes do not. Just as saintly teachers, like Shukadeva Goswami, sometimes speak expansively on spiritual knowledge and sometimes remain silent. So this gives an indication that, yeah, when Shukadeva Goswami goes to the houses of materialistic householders, then he remains silent. He doesn't bother because, you know, 1, the people aren't interested. 2, they wouldn't understand it anyway. And, you know, he doesn't want to waste his time. So, but then when he comes into a scenario where people are actually interested and eager to know, and of all the qualities that we were talking about earlier of, you know, qualified hearer of Srimad Bhagavatam, then they will speak expansively, which is what he's going to do. So even though, you know, when Shukadeva was wandering through the streets of Hastinapur, people didn't recognize him. But when he showed up in Naimisharanya, when he showed up there where Parikshit was, then all the there wasn't just Parikshit, so many sages were there, demigods were there, all the sages and higher beings from, you know, higher planets had actually assembled there because they thought this is when a pure devotee leaves their body, this is an event, you know, this is like an event that is significant, not just on the planet, but for the whole universe. You know, when a soul goes back to Godhead, that's like something that higher beings get very excited about. They want to be there for that event. You know, like when things that we get excited about are like, you know, weddings and birthday parties and, you know, baby showers and let's say graduations from university graduations, or what else, you know, somebody gets a new job. Like in the material world, people get excited about these kinds of things and they'll throw a party for these kinds of things. But what higher beings get excited about and what, you know, they will travel and go there to be for is when a great soul like Maharaj Parikshit is going to leave his body. Why? Because they know that great personalities are going to assemble. There's going to be ecstatic, transcendental katha, and that soul is going to go back to Godhead, and it's going to be, that's actually the biggest celebration, when the soul goes back to Godhead. So, you know, being born is definitely a milestone. Graduating from school is a milestone. Getting married is a milestone. You know, retiring from work, you know, having a retirement party, that's also a milestone. So these are all, you know, important milestones that do deserve some celebration. And actually in the Vedic system, there are, you know, samskaras for many of these things. But the real celebration is when the soul goes back to Godhead. And that's the party that all the sages and demigods want to be there for. They don't want to miss that. They'll travel from far, from other planets even, to be there. So Shukadeva Goswami was very much appreciated and recognized by those sages who knew how to recognize as a great personality. Because it said that only a great personality, only a very advanced spiritual personality can recognize another very advanced spiritual personality. So even though common people just thought Shukadeva Goswami was a dumb, useless person, but as soon as the sages saw him, they were like, he's the person. Krishna has arranged this person to come. He's the person that we're going to invite to speak. So that was shows the difference between different mentalities. And when Shukadeva saw how much they, appreciated him, then he was inspired. He's like, okay, here are people that I can actually speak to. Now I can, end my Mona Vrata, and I can actually exhibit my real level of knowledge and advancement. So, okay. So also, this Shaunaka Rishi, he's thinking that, yeah, ordinarily Shukadeva Goswami wouldn't talk so long with, householders, but he spoke for a long time to Maharaj Parikshit. So Parikshit must be a very exalted personality, and to get him to stay so long and to get him to speak so expansively. So obviously Parikshit is not an ordinary king. And so now he wants to know more about the character of Maharaj Parikshit. And that's the next verse. So someone please read text 9.
Hare Krishna. Abhimanyu sutam sutta prahur bhagavatot tamam tasya janma mahascharyam karmani cha grininaha. It is said that Maharaj Parikshit is a great first-class devotee of the Lord, and that his birth and activities are all wonderful. Please tell us about him.
Go ahead and read the purport too, for that one, please.
The birth of Maharaj Parikshit is wonderful because in the womb of his mother, he was protected by the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. His activities are also wonderful because he chastised Kali, who was attempting to kill a cow. To kill cow means to end human civilization. He wanted to protect the cow from being killed by the great representative of sin. His death is also wonderful because he got previous notice of his death, which is wonderful for any mortal being, and thus he prepared himself for passing away by sitting down on the bank of the Ganges and hearing the transcendental activities of the Lord. During all the days he heard Bhagavatam. He did not take food or drink, nor did he sleep a moment. So everything about him is wonderful, and his activities are worth hearing attentively. The desire is expressed herein to hear about him in detail. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just like the way that Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada is always in his purports. He's so, you can see his devotional enthusiasm, utsahan of the pure devotee, because Shaunaka is saying that, please tell us more about Maharaj Parikshit's glories. So Srila Prabhupada, he just straight, he's like, I'm going to tell the glories of Maharaj Parikshit right here. And so, this purport is just all about Maharaj Parikshit's glories throughout his life. How, his birth was wonderful. He was saved by Krishna within the womb. His activities are wonderful. How he chastised Kali when he was about to kill the bull of Dharma. And how, that he got previous notice of his death. How he totally gave up the kingdom just on a moment's notice and left everything behind and wanted to hear about the activities of the Lord. And even while hearing for 7 days and 7 nights, he didn't eat, he didn't sleep, not for a single moment. So Srila Prabhupada's very enthusiastically, if Srila Prabhupada was there at in the forest of Naimisharanya, he would have been very eager to respond to these questions too. You can see that. Okay. So let's go to the next text. Let's see. Let's read text 10 and 11 both, someone.
Sa samrat kasya vaheto panduna manavardhana prayopavisto gangayam anadrityadhiratsriyam. He was a great emperor and possessed all the opulence of his acquired kingdom. He was so exalted that he was increasing the prestige of the Pandu dynasty. Why did he give up everything to sit down on the bank of the Ganges and fast until death? Namanti yat padaliketam shivaya haniya dhanani shatrava katham savira shriyam angadushyajam yuve satotrastrum aho sahashubhi. He was such a great emperor that all his enemies would come and bow down at his feet and surrender all their wealth for their own benefit. He was full of youth and strength, and he possessed insuperable kingly opulences. Why did he want to give up everything, including his life?
Thank you. You all are so good at beautifully reciting the Sanskrit. So yeah, here Shonika Rishi, he's explaining, he's describing how Maharaj Parikshit was such a great king. He was such a great emperor, and he's describing how the kingdom under the reign of Maharaj Parikshit was just perfect. Everything was wonderful. He practically didn't have enemies. His enemies would all just come and bow down at his feet and just hand over all their wealth, understanding that it was in their own best interest to do so. Because, it was just kind of like the enemies would come and they'd be like, forget it, you're such a great personality. We would rather be under you than opposed to you. So please take all of our money and use it, because you understand the best interest of everyone, and you will take care of us better than we could even take care of ourselves. That was how much faith and trust everybody had in Maharaj Parikshit as their leader. And, and he had all these opulences. He had everything that he needed. And yeah, by his being the king, he was increasing the prestige of the Pandu dynasty. And he was also taking such good care of all the citizens. So it's almost like they're thinking that it's almost irresponsible for him to just give up the kingdom like that, because he was such a good king. It's like, if you have a good leader, it's actually hard to find, a good leader. And so if you have a really good leader that's doing everything so well, is such a great manager, everybody feels perfectly protected and cared for, and things are going on. Like, let's say you have a temple president, it's just absolutely amazing. The temple is flourishing, the preaching is expanding, so many new devotees are joining, everybody in the temple feels cared for, they've set up systems that everybody is connected and has mentors and has, is growing, is learning and advancing, and amazing festivals. The prasadam is incredible. Everything's cooked in ghee. It's like you have a temple president like that, and they've only been serving for maybe a few years, and they're still young, and all of a sudden they're like, I think I'm just going to go to Vrindavan and live on the banks of Radhakund and be a Babaji now. You're just like, no, like, are you kidding? No, you have to stay. Why would you do that? It's so irresponsible. So it's kind of like the mood in which Shonika is asking this question. Like, he was doing such a great job. Everything was going so well. The world was so peaceful. People were so happy. There was prosperity. How could he just leave? How could he just kind of like abandon everybody like that? So obviously they don't know about the whole situation, that how he was cursed to die and all that. That comes later. learn about that later in chapter 18. So yeah, this discussion kind of continues in text 12. Someone read, please read text 12.
Text 12. Shivaya lokas Shivaya lokasabhavaya bhutaye ya uttama shloka parayana janaha jivanti natmarthamaso parashrayam mumocha nirvedya kuttaha kalevaram. Translation. Those who are devoted to the cause of the personality of Godhead live only for the welfare, development, and happiness of others. They do not live for any selfish interest. So even though the Emperor Parikshit was free from all attachment to worldly possessions, how could he give up his mortal body, which was shelter for others?
Yeah, so here they're understanding that it's not just that Maharaj Parikshit was leaving the kingdom and going to retire, but he was leaving his body and he was going to fast until death, right? It was like he was fasting. So because they weren't aware that there was a curse that the snake bird was going to come and bite him and he was going to die, it just looked like he was willfully bringing about his own death. And so, yeah, this same idea that that a Vaishnava, there's a saying also that a Vaishnava lives for the benefit of others. Even ourselves, we should feel that my life is for the benefit of others. Of course, the spiritual benefit of others in the service of Krishna, but we live for the benefit of others. We're always trying to bring other people to Krishna consciousness. We're trying to support devotees in our communities. We're trying to do services to facilitate other people advancing in Krishna consciousness in so many ways, right? We're just always trying to help others grow and be happy. So, sometimes we can think that this world is so bad. Sometimes just like living in the material world and just looking around and hearing the news and observing what's going on, and all the corruption and the politics and the disease and just filthiness. And, it's like, it's just the material world sometimes just so disgusting. And also, not just the world around us, but even our own bodies can give us so much trouble. The adhyatmaka kleshas can be so bad, that our state of health, our physical condition is such that sometimes you just don't want to continue. You think, what's the use of staying in this body? It's barely functional. It gives me so much pain. It's gonna be finished anyway. I don't want to be in this body. I don't want to be in this world. I don't want anything to do with it. Let me just go back to Godhead right now. Has anyone thought that way? Like, Krishna, just come and take me away. So what's wrong with this thinking?
This is mukti, Mataji, not prem. This is the idea.
Okay. Yeah, do you want to explain a little bit more? What's the problem with mukti?
So there is no attachment or love for the Lord. It is still centered around oneself, that I want to be liberated from the pain, and I may not have any connect with the Lord or love for the Lord.
Yeah, so that's the root of the problem with it, is that it's selfish, right? And the whole reason why we're in the material world is because of selfishness, because we wanted to enjoy ourselves separately from Krishna. So that's why sometimes Srila Prabhupada describes mukti, a desire for liberation, as also a material desire. That's how actually Rupa Goswami says that in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. That desire for mukti is also a material desire. Why? Because it's also selfish. And so the point that Shonaka Rishi is making here is that Vaishnava, those who are devoted to the cause of the personality of Godhead, they do not live for any selfish interest. So then how could Maharaj Parikshit be so irresponsible as to leave this world prematurely? Because the world needs Vaishnavas, we shouldn't desire to leave this world prematurely, because the world needs Vaishnavas. There's so few devotees. You know, Sa Mahatma Sadurlabha, such a great soul who's taken shelter of Krishna, is very rare. And if there are no Vaishnavas on the planet, then what hope does anybody else have? So, you know, we need to stay. We need to protect our health and live in a safe situation so that we can all live long lives in the service of and connect many fallen souls to Krishna consciousness, bring many fallen souls to the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada, engage many fallen souls in Prabhupada's mission, and train them up, educate them so that they can go out and do the same. And in this way, keep expanding the Krishna consciousness movement. So, you know, in one sense, maybe it sounds prideful, but it's just a fact that the world needs us. The world needs Vaishnavas. Krishna needs us to be here and do our services. And so, you know, it's really good that all of you are studying the Shastras deeply, taking the Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhava, and I hope you continue and do Bhakti Vedanta, because you're enriching yourself. It's like you're fortifying yourselves to become strong and be powerful instruments in Krishna's mission to uplift and teach people about Krishna consciousness and present Krishna consciousness in a balanced way, you know, because you have a proper understanding. Because there are many devotees that they like to preach, but they haven't really studied the scriptures, so they just kind of like, they say all kinds of things that are, you know, half right. And it can be confusing, you know, to new people. They don't get the full picture, and they can get like a lopsided or skewed understanding of Krishna consciousness, which actually prevents them from becoming strong devotees, or it may even repel them, you know, from Krishna consciousness when you give a presentation that is imbalanced. So it's good to study these things and deeply understand them, understanding them broadly, understand, and, you know, using hermeneutical tools and things to be able to resolve contradictions and put things in proper context and present them in ways that people can easily understand them and accept them and be attracted to Krishna consciousness through scripture. So yeah, well done to all of you, and keep going with this Shastric studies, because the world needs educated Vaishnavas very much, and it's very rare. You see, like, you know, I just did Bhakti Vedanta, and it was, I think the course hasn't been taught many times. Maybe it was like the third time in the history of the planet, the history of at least Kali Yuga, that Bhakti Vedanta has been taught, and none of the classes were more than, you know, 15 students or something out of 8 billion people in the world, you know, and out of those 15 students, I think maybe only a handful are going to graduate. So yeah, we need more learned Shastric scholars. So I encourage you. The world needs it. Okay, so then Shonik is also thinking the world needs an emperor like Maharaj Parikshit. And so he should continue being the emperor. And he's very puzzled. So, okay, let's go to text 13.
तत्सर्वं नः समाचक्ष्व पृष्टो यदि किञ्चन मन्ये त्वां विषये वाचां स्नातमन्यत्र छान्दसात्. Translation: We know that you are expert in the meaning of all subjects except some portions of the Vedas, and thus you can clearly explain the answers to all the questions we have just put to you.
Okay, so here they're addressing Sutta Goswami, and they're again encouraging him, right? Like we read in the first verse. So they're encouraging him that we know that you're expert in the meaning of all subjects, and you can clearly explain the answers to all the questions we've just put to you. So they're placing their confidence in him, that, you know, we're asking you these questions, and we know that you can answer them. We have total faith that you can explain all the answers very clearly. Why? Because you're expert in the meaning of all subjects. But then they say, except some portions of the Vedas. So it's kind of funny that they're like, except some portions of the Vedas. So the portions of some portions of the Vedas that they're referring to are the Karma Kanda portions of the Vedas. And the reason that he's not so expert in those portions of the Vedas is because for someone like Shukadeva Goswami, who's on the Transcendental Platform, those sections of the Vedas are more or less useless. And, what's the use of knowing all the mantras and rituals and Vedic procedures just to increase one's sense gratification? Because a Vaishnava is not interested in sense gratification. And so that's just useless knowledge. And even Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that, the Vedas deal mainly with the subject matter of the three modes of material nature. But you need to rise above these modes and don't become a Vedavada Rata. That's actually like Vedavada Rata. The way Krishna says that, it's like, ignorant people. That's like what ignorant people are interested in. So Shukadeva Goswami is not affected at all by ignorance. And so he had no interest in those parts of the Vedas. So he didn't bother studying it. And apparently Vyasadeva also, because Shukadeva was a liberated soul from birth. Remember, he was in the womb. Actually, no, we're talking about Sutta Goswami here. The Sutta Goswami also, he was the son of Ramaharshana Sutta, who was in charge of the Puranas. So similar situation, he's born in a Brahminical family. He was enriched with Brahminical culture from the very beginning, and he knew the essence of life. And so he learned the essence of the Vedas. Yes, and he was taught by Shukadeva Goswami. So yeah, Shukadeva, he stayed in the womb for 16 years. And when he was born, he was already liberated. He didn't want anything to do with this world. He was born, he was already, practically an adult somehow or other. By Krishna's mystic potencies, that happened. And he just started walking away. He's just like, all right, thanks for, giving birth to me. I'll be leaving now to go and meditate on the Lord in the forest like the rishis do. And like that, he had no interest in the material world. So when Vyasadeva instructed him, then I'm sure he didn't bother telling him much about Karma Kanda because Shukadeva would probably, I can just see Shukadeva Goswami, Vyasadeva is trying to tell him all those things, and he's like, if you're going to talk about this stuff, I'm leaving. Like, I don't want to hear it. This is like practically prajalpa for me. And that's not what I'm interested in. So Shukadeva Goswami, even if he did hear about those things, he wasn't going to repeat it. That did not bear repeating. So therefore Sutta Goswami, because he learned from Shukadeva Goswami, then he didn't hear those things. He wasn't well versed in those things. It just wasn't taught to him, and he also had no interest in it. So by saying that he's not expert in the Karma Kanda portions of the Vedas, it's actually a glorification. It's not a defect. It's not that he's lacking anything. It's more, it's a glory. It's to his credit that he just didn't want to contaminate his mind with that materialistic stuff. So it's like sometimes, devotees in ISKCON that joined when they were very young, and they just did full-time service in Srila Prabhupada's mission, distributing books and preaching and worshiping the deities and just direct services for the temples. But maybe they never really got an education, so they don't have academic degrees. They never worked really in the outside world. They never had a career. So you could say that, yeah, maybe they have a very narrow experience of life. They're not very expert in, corporate administration, or, they may not even be very expert in things like time management, or they may not even be very good at, just reading and, writing or public speaking or things like that, depending on what services they did in ISKCON. They may not be academically inclined, but you can't say that it's a fault, because they've fully embraced the essence of the purpose of life, which is just to surrender to Krishna. They've fully surrendered to Krishna. They've given everything to Krishna. They've done everything for Krishna. And even if they're lacking some material knowledge, even if they don't know how to, balance their financial statement or something, they need to get help with things like with just kind of like practical things in the material world. But it's not a defect. It's actually a glory, because they just didn't want anything to do with it. They're just like, I'm not interested. If this has to be done, then and I'll get help or whatever, but I don't want to become entangled. I want to get involved. So in one sense, yeah, like maybe there is some limitation to how they can preach. Someone who's gone through Grihastha ashram, who's gone through, who's worked in the world in a career, then they may be more well equipped to mentors, a young Grihastha couple, people who are married, people who have jobs, and how to balance their material and spiritual life. But at the end of the day, all these things need to be given up anyway. We're all going to come to the point of Maharaj Parikshit where, death is going to come knocking on our door. And we may be lucky to get some notice, or we may not. But we'll all have to give up our kingdoms. We'll have to give up our treasuries. We'll have to give up our families, our relatives, because when we leave this world, we leave with nothing and with no one. We go alone. So some, exalted personalities like Shonaka Rishi and Sutta Goswami and Shukadev Goswami, they understand that from the very beginning. And so they don't get entangled in it. They don't bother learning about it. They just are fixed, ekanta matir, one pointed, the single pointed vision, ekeha kuranandana, on Krishna. And they don't want to dabble with anything else. Of course, we don't want someone who, these are exalted souls who are liberated from birth. Those of us who are not liberated from birth, then we may need to, go through these situations because we can't artificially imitate those kinds of personalities. And, whatever, attachments or desires that we have, fortunately, there's ways that we can work through those in Krishna consciousness. We can have a Krishna conscious family life, Grihastha ashram. We can have our careers can be dovetailed in Krishna's service. We can use the fruits, the results, the income that we earn from our careers in Krishna's service. So all of it can be spiritualized. So that's the good news. But at the same time, we shouldn't think that someone who didn't go that route, who just totally, lived in a transcendental bubble of spiritual life and full direct devotional service, we shouldn't think that they are any less because they don't know how to do these things, because they haven't got a clue about, how to raise children or how to run a business or, something like that. We shouldn't think that that's a fault. That's actually a glory. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, and sometimes, the way Srila Prabhupada established ISKCON is he gave us the essential ingredients, that if you do this, you can go back to Godhead. So, people who are more like smarta brahmanas, they might criticize Vaishnavas that, they don't know this mantra, they don't know this ritual, they don't know this Vedic procedure. And yeah, so the smarta brahmanas, they know all these things, very well. But yeah, Vaishnavas, they're not interested. It's like, you can criticize us if you want, but we don't care, because we know that that's all really useless. But Srila Prabhupada gave us the essence, and Sutta Goswami, even though he doesn't know much about Karma Kanda, he doesn't know everything Vedic, but he knows what matters. He knows the essence of the Vedas, and he knows Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the ripened fruit of the desire tree of Vedic knowledge. You all must have learned that verse by now, right? Can anyone recite the verse that says that from memory? About Srimad Bhagavatam being the ripened fruit of the desire tree of the Vedas.
It says Nigam Kalpa.
Okay, Amala Charan Prabhu was first. Go ahead.
Yeah, just it's Nigam Kalpataru Galitam Phalam Pibat Shukam Mukharvan. I'm not able to recall the exact word.
Okay, that was a good start. Anyone help him finish? Mini, how you say, Mini?
Nigamakalpatarugalita phalam shukamukhad amritadav sanyutam pibat bhagavatam rasamalaya muhurasika bhuvi bhavuka.
Okay, are you able to explain it?
Srimad Bhagavatam is the ripened fruit. It's like it doesn't have it doesn't have seed, and when a parrot touches the fruit, it becomes more sweetened. So Srimad Bhagavatam is compared to this. This is analogy is given to like this, that the parrot when touches, just bite the fruit, it becomes more ripe, sweet, ripened fruit. The same as Srimad Bhagavatam, when it is. Sorry, I'm not able to complete it.
Okay, that's fine. So the idea here is that Nigama Kalpataru. Nigama means the Vedas, and Kalpataru means like a kalpa vriksha tree, a desire tree. So if you think of, so the Vedas are being compared to a desire tree. Means that in the same way that if you're sitting under a desire tree, whatever fruit you want, that tree will give you. If you go to the Vedas, you can get all your desires fulfilled through the Vedas, through Vedic knowledge. Whether you have material desire for this, that, or the other thing, there are all these injunctions that, that's said also in the Bhagavatam that, if you want this, worship this demigod. If you want that, worship that demigod. If you want, right? I think that's in second canto. Yeah. And then, but then he ends that by saying that a person who has sufficient intelligence, then a person who's actually intelligent, then what's that verse? Oh, I know that verse. 2, 3, 10. I'm just blanking out on it. Tivrena Bhakti Yogena, that one. Who knows that?
Akama sarva kamava.
That's the one. Okay. Akama sarva kama va moksha kama daradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. Thank you. So yeah, he says, if you want this material thing, worship this demigod. If you want that material thing, worship that demigod. But if you're actually intelligent, then even if you're full of material desires, or you have no desires, or you're desiring liberation, then you'll perform powerful, intensive devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then that's the fulfillment of, that'll fulfill everything. That's like the one switch that lights up everything. So anyways, the idea is that the Vedas give prescriptions for fulfilling whatever your desires are. Material desires can be there, and then you go to the Vedas, you look it up. Oh, you want this, do this. Okay, so you can get all your desires fulfilled by the Vedas. But the Vedas are like a tree, desire fulfilling tree, and trees full of fruits. But then the actual, so the fruit is the valuable thing of the tree. And out of all the fruits, the fruit that people want is the ripened one. The fruit that stayed on the tree and was sun ripened, not the one that just fell off the tree before it even got ripe, and then you have to, put it on your windowsill or something and wait 2 months, and it ends up getting all shriveled and dried up before it even gets ripe. Sometimes that happens. But the fruit that ripened on the tree is like in the sunshine, is so juicy and so sweet, and then the parrot knows how to find the ripe fruits. So the parrot goes and finds that one and pecks it, and after being pecked, becomes even more sweet. So that fruit, the ripened tree ripened fruit pecked by the parrot, the sweetest fruit on the whole tree. That's the Srimad Bhagavatam. So don't worry about the tree, the trunk and the branches and all that. Just focus on the fruit, because that's what the tree is offering us. So the other Vedas are like the tree, the branches, twigs, but the fruit is Srimad Bhagavatam. Not only the fruit, but the best fruit, the ripened fruit. So, yeah. And then we also hear in the very beginning of the Bhagavatam that the Srimad Bhagavatam is the highest truth. And actually it kicks out all of these lower conceptions. So these other portions of the Vedas that Sutta Goswami was not so expert in, actually they're not really useful at all. And that's why the Bhagavatam just kicks them all out. Can anyone say the verse that talks about that? Somebody apart from Rukmini Hari Sevani? One of you must know it. It's the second verse. You guys have to be proactive about learning your verses. Don't wait until, you know. There we go. Yes. Can you say the whole thing, Prabhu?
Dharma projito ketu atra parmo nirmat sanam satam vedam vastro atra vastu shildam taptaryo namulanam mahamuni krite kam va praishwara sadyo hridyo avadhute atra kriti vishushpuri tatchanat.
Okay, thank you very much. That was great. Would you like to explain it a little bit?
Yeah. Dharma projito kaituvatra, that is cheating dharma, that is giving only dharma, artha, kam and moksha. That is called cheating dharma. Dharma projito kaituvatra, parmo nirmat saranam sita. It is not for those who are nirmat sara, without having this material kind of things. Nirmat saranam, those who are not, those who are rather pure. This is not for them. Parmo satam. And Vedvyas has given us Srimad Mahabhagavatam, Mahamuni Krite, Kimva Parayeshwara. So that is giving us pure transcendental knowledge. Parayeshwara, it is not on this mundane, it is a spiritual platform. Rest, Sadhya, that sits in your heart. Sadhya Hirdaya Uddhute Atra, that sits in your heart. I can't complete it, but word to word. It's like that.
That's okay. That's great.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Bhagavatam, which is giving us a sense of the total spiritual kind of thing, which gives us a right direction, what a human should do or aspire for.
Yeah, good. Okay, so how is that second verse related to this text 13 that we're talking about now? Somebody else can also answer if you want.
Because here also it is talking about same thing. This is karma kind of a thing. So that karma kind of a thing which you are talking about, that is also being ignored or rejected in that second verse. And again, that is again being rejected here.
Right. Good. Yeah. So the Bhagavatam rejects karma kanda, that whole dharma, artha, kama, moksha system, which is cheating religion, because it promises you moksha, but it doesn't necessarily lead to moksha. Right? Because we see that people do their dharma, and they do their prescribed duties, their occupational duties according to varnashram dharma, and then they get some economic development from that. They get some artha. And then with that artha, they get some kama. But then how kama leads to moksha, that's a great mystery. That doesn't always happen, because Krishna explains, that the material desire is insatiable. It's like a fire. And the more fuel you supply to it, the more hotter it burns and the more fuel it wants. So that's the nature of lust, is that it's not satisfied by enjoyment, but enjoyment just increases it. So in that way you get cheated, because you think, yeah, I'm going to do all this and then I'm going to get moksha, and then you don't get moksha necessarily without some, very strong help and renunciation. But after a life of enjoyment, then it's actually easier to it's actually a better path to suffer. Because the thing is that by doing your dharma properly, you can actually get wealth, and you can actually enjoy life a little bit. That whatever pleasures are available in this world, you can actually get them. But then that actually becomes an obstacle, more of an obstacle to moksha than a path leading to it. And we see that people who suffer in this world, then they're more likely to, come to Krishna consciousness, because they realize this material world is miserable. I need an alternative. Whereas people who worship the demigods and get their desires fulfilled and get all their material dreams coming true, they're like, hey, this material world is great. You can be really happy here. I have a nice house. I have a nice family. Everything's successful. My life is easy. They're just thinking about, just increasing their material dynasty, like that. So it's cheating. And so, yeah, Bhagavatam, like Prabhu was saying, Bhagavatam kicks out all this karma kanda stuff. And therefore, Sutta Goswami, he also kicked it out. He didn't bother with it, and he didn't bother to learn it. So, he's the good speaker of the Bhagavatam. He's the proper speaker of the Bhagavatam because he understood the importance of the Bhagavatam and how nothing else is actually important. Like in that verse, it says, Kim va. What is the need for any other scripture? What is the need for all these other shrutis and all these karma kanda things and all these other Puranas? All we need is the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's the only thing. It has everything. Everything is there because Krishna is there. And then that last line is talking about how sadyo vidyavirudyate shrutibhish tachanat, that as soon as one attentively and submissively hears the Srimad Bhagavatam, then the Supreme Personality of Godhead at once becomes, in that moment, takshanat, and that moment becomes established within one's heart. And that's what we want. We don't even want moksha. Like someone was saying, moksha is a material desire. Moksha is totally bogus. It's also Maya. We don't want that. What we want is Krishna. We want Krishna to be established in the heart. And that can be achieved by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. And we want, when we finish our life, we don't care about all these material things. We're going to have to leave them all behind. We just want Krishna. And that's what Maharaj Parikshit is exhibiting here, is giving up the kingdom, giving up family, giving up wealth, giving up position, even though his acting in that position was so beneficial for so many people. But still, of course, it wasn't his desire to leave at that time. It was, he had no choice in the matter. But he shows the example that all these things are just, need to be given up. And what we really need to hold on to is Krishna. And therefore he removes himself from all that and goes and hears about Krishna. So it's a very amazing and very rare soul that can do that. So the sages are really interested in, how did that happen? How did Shukadeva Goswami end up going there to the bank of the Ganga with Parikshit? And, when did it all happen? And how is it that Parikshit ended up there in the first place? He was such a great king. And, they're asking all these questions. So that's what we're learning about today. We're going to stop with this verse here for today. And tomorrow we'll pick up from text 14 and finish the chapter. So, any questions or comments, reflections on what we've covered today?
Yes, Mataji, I really like the concept of trying to find the emotions behind the speaker. When the speaker is saying something, generally we get to the knowledge of what he's saying, understanding what he's saying, but to get to the emotions behind the speaker, I really liked. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's really important. Actually, I had that realization first time when I was doing Bhakti Vaibhava. Probably you know Tapan Mishra Prabhu that lives in Mayapur, and he was teaching the section about Dhruva Maharaj from the 4th canto, and he was going so into the emotions. You know, he was like, and just imagine how, you know, Suniti is feeling, and imagine how, you know, Dhruva Maharaj is feeling and his father's feeling, and it's just like getting into it and making us think very deeply, and he like making it all very real for us, like the story and the bringing out the personalities and the relationship dynamics and the nature of the Kshatriya, and you know, all these things. And it became so vivid. You know, you actually start feeling like, you know, when you watch a movie, of course we're not supposed to watch movies, but before you became a devotee, you probably watched some movies. So you know how when you're watching a movie and it's so well done that you start really feeling what the main character is feeling, right? Like if they're in a dangerous situation, you start feeling afraid. Or, you know, if something good is happening, like, yay, you know, you're really happy for them, or, you know, like that. So when we really get into Bhagavatam and we hear it from somebody who, you know, really deeply connects with it and connects with the devotees and the personalities in the Srimad Bhagavatam, then we're able to actually feel what they're feeling. And that's what we want to do, especially when we get to the 10th canto. That's the whole point, you know, is that when we read about pastimes like Damodar Lila, we want to feel what Mother Yashoda is feeling for Krishna. You know, when we're reading about Rasa Lila, we want to feel what the gopis are feeling. We want to feel that pain of separation when Krishna leaves them. We want to feel the joy that they feel when Krishna comes back. And then, of course, you know, all the different relationships with Krishna are there in the 10th canto. So then, as we go deeper into feeling what those pure devotees are feeling, we're going to feel more, you know, like we're going to connect more with the feelings of a particular group of devotees. And then that can give us some indication of, you know, our eternal constitutional relationship with Krishna. And those feelings become, we're not just feeling what that person's feeling, but we're feeling our real feelings, the feelings of the soul, our spiritual emotions. We're reconnecting with those. So it's all very important, and we can practice that as we go through the Bhagavatam. And that's actually the perfection of life. Thank you. Anything else?
It also kind of, Mati, gives an answer to my question. I was thinking that, you know, Srimad Bhagavatam is a Rasa Shastra. How do I, how do I understand this thing? So I was contemplating last week on this question as to, it is a Rasa Shastra, I understand theoretically, but how to go about it? So I think perhaps this was answer of my question, if I understand correctly.
Good, yeah. And we also see that in the same verse that in 113, the last line says, well, the last two lines, Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Muhur Aho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavukaha. So he's saying, you know, he's calling out to those who are rasikas. He's saying this is the book for the rasikas, those who are full in the knowledge of mellows. In other words, those who are able to relish rasa, they're called rasikas. And he's saying, Aho, rasikas. Hey there, you rasikas. Listen to the Srimad Bhagavatam, drink it. This is the rasa. This is the juice. You know, he's doing a play on words here. He's like, Aho, like, hello. Those of you who are rasikas, I'm calling to you. This is for you. This is the juice. This is the rasa that you want to drink. So drink it. Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam. Drink it deeply. So that's yeah, so we should get into that mood that this Bhagavatam is full of rasa, and that rasa is for drinking, and we should drink it very deeply. Don't just keep it on the mental platform or intellectual platform. Drink it deeply into the heart. Feel it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Something else? You all are so quiet. I had some of you in Bhakti Shastri for a Nectar of Devotion, and you were much more talkative then, so you have to start being more lively.
Hare Krishna Mataji. I like the Bhakti is all about emotions. I liked it very much because it involves so much of emotions.
Good. Yeah. Yeah, if we don't have, if our emotions don't become engaged in transcendental topics, then because we're very, the soul is full of emotions. So if we don't connect with spiritual emotions, if we don't, feel have an emotional experience of Bhagavatam and Krishna's pastimes and the pastimes of Krishna's great devotees, then our emotions are going to be engaged materially. And then we're just going to end up disturbed. We're going to get emotional about all of our, family problems and problems at work and all the, crazy things that go on in ISKCON, and, and we're going to become disturbed and distressed or, like that. So in terms of the things that happen in the material world, don't get too emotional about it. We need to be a little detached and reserve your emotions apply your emotions somewhere else. Don't apply your emotions so much to material things. Because sometimes we can get really emotionally involved with all kinds of things that are external to our real selves as spirit souls. Especially with family matters. Family relationships can be so emotionally entangling. And so, it's not that we shouldn't be affectionate towards our family members and things, but we shouldn't allow it to totally pull us in and like sometimes our emotions get just completely wrapped around somebody's finger. It's just like our emotions are just hanging on somebody, in our family or a close friend or situation. It's like, no, we need to be practical and take care of people and be affectionate and, all that. But, just don't let the emotions be so tied up in those things that we don't have any emotional space for Krishna. Ganga Shakti Devi Dasi.
Hi Krishna Mataji. So I was just wondering, like you just said that we should exercise certain level of detachment, and also that we were discussing how if someone has been spending a lot of time in Krishna consciousness, in the sense they've been brought up like that, and that they have that thing of not having what we call worldly wisdom, so to speak, and not good at managing other things which might be useful in the material world, it's not a defect. So I was just wondering that, since we are always trying to juggle certain roles, multiple roles, is it okay to sometimes not give your 100% at your workplace and do not a shoddy job, but do a less than perfect job and conserve your energy for spiritual activities?
An interesting question. Of course, we need to be responsible. We don't want devotees to be seen as irresponsible people or unreliable or incapable. We want to set a good example for others, right? And Krishna talks about that in the Bhagavad Gita. He says that although there's no work prescribed for me within all the three worlds, still I perform my duties, because if I didn't, then others would follow my path, and that would be the path of ruination for them, because they have to do their prescribed duties. So yeah, whatever duties are prescribed for us, we should try to do to the best of our ability, but do them in Krishna consciousness. It's like when Krishna was the whole Bhagavad Gita is about that, it's Krishna's encouraging Arjuna to fight, to do his duty. And he wanted him to fight to his full capacity, and he didn't want him to hold back. The whole problem was that he wanted to hold back. He didn't want to kill Bhishma, he didn't want to kill Drona. How can I kill these great souls who are my teachers and my gurus, my grandfather? And he's like, okay, I'll kill the Kauravas and all, the demoniac supporters, but how can I? He wanted to hold back. Krishna's like, no, don't hold back. You need to put your all into this, but not to get a kingdom, not to get fame, not for your own happiness, not even for, justice, but for me. Do it for me and do it to the best of your ability. So if you are in that situation where you have a job and, you have certain job description, you have roles and responsibilities that you need to perform, then do them properly, but do it for Krishna. Think of it that this is right now, this is the service that Krishna has given me. And so I'm going to do it to the best of my ability, not to earn money, not to get a promotion, not to please my boss, not to, instruct my colleagues or whatever, but for the pleasure of Krishna. And if we look at it like that, then it's also devotional service. It's all about our consciousness. Because even in the temple, there's many services that devotees often have to do that are can be seen as just completely mundane stuff, right? Like, if there's construction, so then devotees may be engaged in some construction activities, just like there are so many people in the world that are overseeing the construction of buildings who aren't devotees. But a devotee is also overseeing construction of a building, and it may not be a temple. It may be like apartments for devotees to live in. It may be like some storage shed, like a go down or something so, it's the same activity, but the difference is the consciousness. So yeah, we just have to do everything for Krishna in Krishna consciousness, and don't worry about what it is that you're doing. Just worry about the consciousness with which you're doing it.
Just to add on this to Mataji, that suppose we are working, we are doing job or business. If we are doing job or business in the consciousness of Krishna consciousness, then it's also our duty as prescribed in the scriptures.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And then if you want to spend more time on your spiritual life, then, just work. While you're at work, you should work to the best of your capacity. But you could get a job that's not so demanding, or that doesn't require so many hours. But like there's one boy in our community and he's just finishing college and he's going to get a job in New York City on Wall Street, and it's 60 hours a week. And I'm just like, why would you get a job where you have to work 60 hours a week? That's crazy, just get a job where you have to work 40 hours a week, or, maximum. And yeah, so if you have an option to work, less hours, and you can still, pay your bills and, maybe simplify your life so you don't need so much money or something, and you can still make ends meet by working less hours, then that's good, because then you have more hours to do your more constitutional devotional activities. But whatever number of hours you work, while you're working, you should try to do the best you possibly can for the pleasure of Krishna.
Yeah, you mean to say we need to try that, but in this, if somebody is working in very high technical job, very demanding job, then in that case, how he should balance out that.
What do you mean, how should he balance it out?
I mean to say, for example, somebody's a policeman, for example. He has to work 12 hours, for example. Okay,
Yeah.
so sometimes he has to do that job, and after 12 hours, he's tired and he has to take rest and do other mundane activities. And here, definitely, he will get less time to, to just devote some time into devotional service.
Yeah.
So, in that situation, he should look out for alternative, or he should remain there and just be conscious and just continue with the job.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to find a way that you can, our devotional practices, especially, chanting 16 rounds, studying Srila Prabhupada's books, that should be the priority. That whatever else goes on in my life, I need to chant 16 rounds, right? So, even on the front lines. Yeah. So, whatever is going on, we need to do our 16 rounds, and that needs to be accommodated. Everything else is flexible. Anything else can change. 16 rounds cannot change.
Absolutely.
Everything else in my life can just go to hell. 16 rounds is not going to change.
Absolutely.
Like that. Because that 16 rounds is what's going to keep us in Krishna consciousness. Is our lifeline. That's like the rope.
Absolutely.
It's
You're
like
right.
you're at the bottom
Absolutely.
of the well, and you're the bottom of the well, and you're holding onto the rope, and someone's pulling you up. So in this case, Krishna's pulling us up to the spiritual world, and our lifeline, that rope, is 16 rounds of japa. So let's say you're getting pulled up the well, and there are things that are happening on the way up. Like some bee lands on you and stings you. So you're not gonna, even though that bee's stinging you, it's hurting like anything. You're not gonna let go of the rope. You're just gonna bear it, Or maybe you're going up the well and somebody, you see something there, on the side of the well, some drawing or some interesting thing there. You're not gonna stop. You're gonna let go. You're just not gonna let go of the rope for anything. So like that, anything else can be happening around us, but we have to chant 16 rounds.
Sure. Thank you.
And then whatever necessary adjustments need to be made, that's up to you to consult with, I can't give individualized advice in a particular situation, but, you consult with your senior devotee mentors and spiritual master and try to come to a solution. But another thing is that you just pray. If you pray that Krishna, I'm in this situation, I have to work so many hours, I have to work 12 hours a day, and I still have to get home and do things and family, and I have to eat, and I have to do all these things. I really want to dedicate more time to your direct service. I want to be able to study more and do service in the temple, maybe do some service on the altar or something like that, help out with preaching programs. I want to do more like those kinds of things and not have to spend so many hours at work. Please, help me that to happen. And so Krishna can make some arrangement if we sincerely desire. Now there are some devotees that I know that, they work so-called full-time jobs. At least they get paid for working a full-time job. But they work remotely. Now, since COVID, a lot of people work from home. So they're in their homes and they're just on the computer, and there's something like a team leader for a corporation or something. And they can really get everything done. They're supposed to work an 8-hour day, but they can get everything done in 2 hours. And they just, they meet with their people, they assign tasks, they check in on what's going on, they rally up the team, they get everybody fired up, and then everybody goes and does things, and he did his job. And then he can just turn off his video and turn off the sound and go and, chant japa or.
Absolutely, Mataji. I can relate with that because I'm working from home.
There you go.
Last 3 years.
So if you really desire, then Krishna can make an arrangement that to give you a job, or to make it such that your job can still allow you to serve Krishna and get paid for it.
Sure, Mataji. Thank you very much.
All right. Jai Kumari.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Dandvat Pranam. Mataji, I have a question from text 4. you told that Shukadev Goswami was not impersonal. He was Uttama Adhikari. Many times we have heard in lectures from different speakers that Shukadev Goswami was an impersonalist, but he was not at the same time envious of the personal feature of Krishna. So how to understand this? I mean, I have little confusion in this. Please clear.
Yeah. So I'm just saying what the words mean here, that those words, where is it? Oh, let me just go back to that verse. So that's 144. Yeah, I was just saying what the words there that mean, that near vikalpakaha literally means without varieties. And ekanta matir means fixing the mind on one thing. So it doesn't necessarily mean that he was an impersonalist. You know, an Uttama Adhikari is also near vikalpakaha and ekanta matir. So, but it's and it says here Mahayogi, which Prabhupada translates a great devotee. So if Prabhupada's saying that he's a great devotee, then how can we say he's an impersonalist? Or if we want to if we want to say a Mahayogi, then that could be translated as an impersonalist, right? Because there are impersonalist yogis. But just the point I'm making is that because often, like, especially for ISKCON devotees, impersonalist can be a bad word. You know, it's almost like, oh, you're just an impersonalist. So, but Shukadev Goswami wasn't that kind of impersonalist. You know, he wasn't the kind of personalist that Srila Prabhupada would often condemn. But he was somebody who, I mean, Prabhupada's translating here, a great devotee. So if we would say that he's an impersonalist and also say that he was a great devotee, then it seems a little contradictory, right? So then we have to understand, if he was a great devotee, it's all in the same sentence here. His son Vyasa was a great devotee, an equibalanced monist, whose mind was always concentrated in monism. So how is it a devotee is a monist? Because usually monist is an impersonalist. So the explanation I gave resolves the two things by showing how a devotee actually is a monist, because he's focused on one thing, and that one thing is Krishna. And he sees everything as Krishna because Krishna is the absolute truth. So that's not impersonalism. But you could say that Shukadev Goswami in the beginning, you know, like when he first came out of the womb, that his knowledge of Krishna, like the name, form, qualities, pastimes of Krishna, was not complete. So then it was that, you know, Vyasa sent some of his disciples to go find him, and then they were reciting some verses about the glories of Krishna. You know, Aho Bhakiyam Kutastan Stana Kala Kutam, that verse about how Krishna, how amazing it is that Krishna gave liberation, or not just liberation, that Krishna, he accepted Putana, who was a demoness who came to try to kill him, but he accepted her as his nurse, like in Vatsalya Ras, and allowed her to enter Goloka Vrindavan and serve Mother Yashoda there in the spiritual world, even though she was. So it's like, how merciful, who could be more merciful? Who is a better person to surrender to than this? And so there are a few verses like that that Vyasadev's disciples recited in earshot of Shukadev when he was in the forest, and Shukadev became attracted, right? And that's how we hear that Atmarama Chamunayo verse, that even though he was Atmarama, even though he was completely self-satisfied, even though he had completely spiritual vision, but he was still attracted to the pastimes. But that doesn't mean that he didn't necessarily know about Krishna. It just means that he was attracted to the pastimes. Like we know about Krishna, but still, if somebody's, you know, some great devotee is going to speak Krishna Katha, we're going to go, right? We're going to be attracted. We're going to want to hear. We're going to want to learn more. We're going to want to you know, find out what their personal insights are and what they, you know, their how they tell ecstatic recitation of the pastime. So it also could be that. I mean, after all, Shukadev spoke those pastimes, right? So, you know, he was a very highly qualified personality. So we just want to be careful when we use that word impersonalist, that we're not like, you know, using it in a disparaging sense, because we definitely don't want to offend Shukadev Goswami. So yeah, sometimes devotees like to highlight how, and also that's a nice point. It can be taken to an extreme, but devotees like to highlight how, yeah, Shukadev Goswami was an impersonalist, but then when he heard those verses, then he became attracted and he became the greatest devotee. Kind of like the four Kumaras. Actually, the four Kumaras actually were impersonalists, but then when they smelled the tulsi leaves coming from the, you know, the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu, then they became devotees. So in one sense, it's nice to hear about how the these little things in bhakti, just by hearing, just by smelling, by any contact with anything related to Krishna, the heart can be transformed, totally transformed, and one can be elevated from the impersonalist conception to the actual understanding of Bhagavan, the supreme feature of God. But impersonalism, Brahman, is also a feature of God. It's also a level of spiritual understanding, and it's also a transcendental position. So we shouldn't belittle it, but we shouldn't ourselves, we shouldn't get hung up on it either. Is that okay?
Yes, Mataji, thank you so much.
Okay, I think we're going over time now, 9:36 on my clock. So we better stop here, and I'll see you all tomorrow. So please read the rest of the chapter, read the verses and purports, and so we can have some in-depth discussion. And also while you're reading, any questions that come to your minds, please note them down so that you can ask me. And I'm happy with you asking questions throughout the class. You don't need to wait till the end. Okay? All right. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Premanandi. Hari Hari Bo.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji.